Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Naruto Got Harem with Jinx and Arcane. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Powder was a brave girl, at least she liked to think so. Not as brave as Vander or Vi, but still pretty brave. It was the little things, bit by bit, breath by breath, baby steps. You had to crawl before you learned to walk, and walk before you figured out how to run. So once again, baby steps. Thanks for the help, kiddo. But this nope, wrong step. She clambered back until her back hit an alleyway wall. Even then she kept pushing against it, eyes bulging, chest heaving as her doom approached. She'd bumped into him on the street entirely by chance, seen him slumped against a wall and tossed him a few coins. Now she was regretting it. Milo and Clagger would give her hell for this, she just knew it. Never mind Vi, I'm a little lost. The one-armed man laughed as he scratched the back of his head. Any chance you could give me directions? Powder shook her head. No, don't know nothing at all. Whiskered cheeks dimpled in a small smile. You think I'm a bad guy, don't ya? You crazy homeless hobo guy leaning against the wall with next to nothing to his name, pretty sure he wasn't right in the head. Looked young, too. Not an adult. Not really. And yet for all his injuries and tattered clothes, he looked utterly at his ease. Somehow that made her even more nervous. On the streets it was confident ones you needed to watch out for, the laughing ones, the smiling ones. The lunatics and addict would do terrible things to you, but it was the sane ones that were the real danger. Their kind always had a plan. Those eerie bright blue eyes and wild hair didn't help. He must have seen some semblance of anxiety on her face too, because he lowered his good arm. Sorry, did I scare you? Ponder flinched a little and shied away. Relax, I'm not gonna hurt you. Abruptly his brow furrowed as he looked away. Oi, I'm getting to it, Kurama. Turning his face aside he palmed one cheek and shook his head. Lay off. What the heck was Kurama weird guy? Was he talking to himself? Only the crazies down here did that. Maybe he was worse than he thought. Still, he might leave her alone if she just answered her questions. Her eyes flicked to the other side of the street, seeking safety. Do you know where the elemental nations are? He asked at length. I'm trying to get back to them. Nations elemental. Powder wrinkled her nose and blinked him. The heck are those? That whiskered visage closed down. You too? How his face went curiously blank as he regarded her. Everyone's given me that same damn look lately. He tittered for a moment before he shook his head. Feels like everyone wants to be my enemy these days. Quick as a flash, his smile returned tenfold. Well, you gave me enough for a meal, so I'll give you something in return. He pushed himself upright. What you want in return? What? As she looked on, the blonde boy summoned a strange black staff to his good hand. What do you want? His question floored Powder, if only because it had been so very long since a stranger asked what she wanted. What did she want? The question pounced upon Powder and caught her flat-footed. She knew the answer, of course. It was simple. She wanted to be useful, strong, like the other kids, fast enough to help, brave enough to take risks. She wanted her blasted bombs to work, but most of all, she told him. He listened intently. Not a word was said. Not one. Is that all? At length, the crazy blonde blinked. You want to protect your family. All right. His head bobbed. I can do something about that. But first, his stomach growled a little. Is there anywhere around her that serves a decent meal? Powder gulped once and dared a tentative smile. I might know a place. Vander had made a career of reading people. Make no mistake, his fighting days were done and behind him. He could still scrap with the best of them, mind you, but these days he fought with words, not his fists. Hound of Zon they called him. He'd been a terror, a killer of killers, slayer of men. But this fellow, he took one look at the man standing in his doorway and saw a fox. Both a trickster and pranksters, a smiling face that hid great power beneath a cheery facade. He wasn't even looking his way. Wide blue eyes took in the pub and those within, regarding it all as he gaped like a fish. And yet that was undoubtedly Powder holding his hand as she tugged him along, chatting to him as only a child could. Powder, who usually knew better than this. Powder, who just made a new friend. Vander's brow shot into his hairline. Well, I'll be. A new player had entered the game. How'd you lose the arm? Of all the questions Naruto had expected today, that was not one of them. Vander had already subjected him to the usual battery of inquiries. Who was he? Why was he here in the Undercity? What had he promised Powder? Why was she following him around like a lost kitten? Was he a danger? But that one had actually brought him up short. Kurama scoffed in the back of his head. Saw that coming. Well, bracing his good limb against the bar, he pushed himself upright and faced the barkeep fully. Suppose someone had to ask sooner or later. His reward was a fresh bowl of ramen, all but brimming with noodles and broth. While not quite the fine fare he favored from Ikaraku, Zon's equivalent proved more than adequate enough to suit his tastes. He tucked into with a happy hum. Say what you would about this hound of the underground, but Vander made a mean dish. It also gave him time to consider his answer. Lost at saving a friend, he said at last, unable to hide the grimace from his face. Liar. An awful low voice hissed in the back of his head. You killed me, Naruto. You let me die. No, his mind rejected the notion wholesale. I didn't kill anyone. He was alive. I felt that his last coherent memory consisted of lying there on the ground, bleeding out beside Sasuke. Of feeling the earth shift underfoot like water, an awful feeling accompanied by a low roar ... and then nothing. He'd opened his eyes 3 days ago to find himself, well, somewhere else. His regeneration had kicked in soon thereafter, and while it had healed the worst of his wounds, it did nothing for high guilt. It gnawed at him. Stop. He flinched. You don't know that. If I survived, so did he. It was just a little loss. He'll be fine. Hey, Kurama jabbed him, shattering his reverie. Stop spacing out and focus. He's talking to you, for crying out loud. He'd been talking to himself again, hadn't he? He needed to get a grip. I'm sorry. He blinked back at Powder's old man. Wanna run that by me again? Vander quirked a graying bow. I said that's a respectable thing to do. Must have meant a great deal to you, this friend of yours. Those words were spoken kindly, but they struck Naruto hard, a proverbial fist to his confidence, more powerful than he could put into words. His head bowed. Rather than answer, he turned back to his meal and focused wholeheartedly on devouring it. At length he swallowed and managed a nod. Yeah, I'll cut to the chase, then. A bottle thunked down beside his bowl, drying his eye. What do you want with Powder? Naruto bridled a bit as he polished off the last of the broth in bowl. And now they came to the meat of the matter. A few good meals had replenished his stamina, but this line of inquiry threatened to drain it from him all over again. He found himself grateful she'd run off with her siblings, if only to spare her the awkwardness of this conversation. He could always track her down later. I'm training her, he answered at length. No point in lying. She did me a favor, and now I'm paying her back. Eye for an eye, that sort of thing. Nothing like that. His hand dipped into the worn pouch at his side and came up with a golden coin. It danced between his knuckles as flexed his fingers. I was starving. She gave me money for food and brought me here. Vander propped an arm on the counter. Why her? Naruto feigned a shrug. Why indeed? Because he pitied her, because she reminded him of himself at that age, because she'd seen a starving man on the corner and immediately gave him what little money she had. The list went on. They'd be here all day if he stopped to list everything. In the end he settled for a more ambiguous answer. Because she's earned it. Vander didn't relent, his eyes were stern as steel. Earned what exactly? Naruto stole a wry glance at his marked hand, eyeing the pale white circle within. He should have lost it with his dominant arm, but rather than fade, that strange mark had simply moved to his other palm. Even now he felt it slowly replenishing itself, feeding off his and Kurama's chakra even as it empowered them to new heights. He still held the last vestiges of the sage's power in his chakra coils. With power came knowledge, the secrets to esoteric techniques he had never before known. They buzzed in the back of his brain like fireflies, snatches of knowledge he didn't truly understand, yet they benefited him all the same. What would Sakura call it? A symbiotic relationship. So long as he didn't throw himself headlong into the fray and exhausted utterly, he had nothing to fear. But back to Powder. She'd earned the right to be taught. He clenched his fingers into a fist. Dozens of people passed me by without so much as a second thought, but she stopped. In all honesty, he was contemplating giving her chakra. Maybe, if she was as pure as he thought she was, it might be possible. This wasn't a gift he wanted to give lightly, but it seemed the only way to keep the promise he'd made to her. Just as the sage of Sixth Paths had first given chakra to the people of his word, so could he. The knowledge burned in the back of his brain as keenly as if it were his own. He wouldn't know if he could truly do it until he tried. No, do or do not, there is not try. But did he want to? Little Powder might well be an exception to most of the filth down here, but in giving her this gift he'd need to teach her more than he'd originally intended. Possibly a lifetime of training, likely with little in the way of reward. Many would call that madness. Then again, madness is contagious. And what is the definition of madness? Normality was a lie, after all. Everyone was unique. There you are, all squared away. Vander slid a rusty key ring across the counter, snapping him back to the present. Your room's up in the attic. Kurama offered a low whistle. I like this one. He understands. What? Just like that. Naruto swept a finger through it, dangling it underneath. While it felt nice to be shown some proper hospitality, he wasn't sure he deserved it. I can stay here, but I haven't done anything to earn it at all, yet. You will in a moment. The aging barkeep pushed off the counter. But first, a question. Just how strong are you? Naruto found himself quirking a brow. Strong enough, I guess. Why? No reason. The twinkle in his eye said otherwise. Dodge. Wait, Whaddya mean dodge. Vander moved. Naruto reacted accordingly. A clenched fist smacked into his open palm, producing a vicious shockwave that blew the blonde's hair back. The bar stool creaked ominously beneath him, but he didn't budge an inch. Blue eyes met dark gray. Neither yielded. A low growl snaked through the air. He wasn't sure who it came from. His wrist twisted and yanked the barkeep forward, only to grunt as the man's forehead bashed against his. One monster eyed another. Neither yielded. In that moment, Naruto felt he gained some measure of the man Powder called Papa. His gaze drifted up to the gauntlets hanging from the bar. Here was a killer who had cast his gloves aside, an old hound who no longer bared his fangs, a man who sought to become something better, not for himself, but for the sake of his family. He could respect that, admire it, even. His was a resolve few could aspire to. At length, Vander withdrew, plucked a pipe from his coat, then lit it. Thought I told you to dodge. You did. Naruto lowered his arm, found himself smiling despite it all. Didn't feel like it. Not bad. The former fighter chortled a little, considering him as one might a fine gem. Bit sloppy, though. Who taught you how to punch? No one, really. Naruto rolled his good shoulder. I'm mostly self-taught. He fell silent at that brash remark. Any other tricks? Got something you don't mind losing? Vander thumbed his bearded chin as he considered the sorry state of the pub. At length, his eye settled on a ramshackle wall nearby, crude plaster and all, well out of the way. Hey, that musty thing over there's been crumbling for a bit now. Been meaning to tear it down and build it back up. Why don't you? Naruto pointed a golden digit at it, not once budging from his seat. A miniature racing shuriken whistled forth from his finger. With a thought it hurtled forward. It was over in an instant. The wall didn't so much fall as it did disintegrate outright. There wasn't even any rubble left to fall to the wayside. More than a few patrons shied back, eyes bulging. Naruto blew on his still smoldering finger. How's that? All right, maybe he was showing off a bit. What could he say? Vander had left him in a good mood. It felt like he was staring at an older version of himself, a man willing to die for his ideals, someone willing to take on the world itself for the sake of what he deemed was right. Older, harder, perhaps a bit wiser, but the resemblance was there, if not in appearance then beliefs. How could they not rile him up? Vander whistled at the gaping hole he'd left within, then looked back to him. You're not a mage, are you? The ghost of a smile touched Naruto's face. No, not a mage. Dunno what that is. You seem a decent enough sort. He took a long puff from his pipe and exhaled deeply, so let me give you some advice. Something darker still flashed through those dark eyes. You said you'd help Powder. I'm fine with that. But if you hurt those kids, you hurt me. Naruto flicked him a thumbs up. Got it. Vander offered his pipe to him. On a whim Naruto leaned in and took a puff of it. Mistakes were made. His eyes bulged even as his lips puckered. Black he recoiled, hacking and coughing. That's vile. How do you stand it? You get used to it. The old brawler clapped him on the back. Welcome to the lanes. And kid, Naruto paused. Yeah, look after Powder. She's had it rough, too. Naruto risked a brief glance over his shoulder. Sure enough, he found the runt lingering by the door. A weary sigh threaded through the air. Don't have to tell me twice. Vi didn't trust easily. When you grew up on the streets, family was all you had. That and the strength of your own two fists. Vander was family. So were Milo and Clagger. Powder was her sister Bai. She'd fight for them. Die for them, if it came to that. Family was family. You didn't mess with family. So who was this weirdo and why was her baby sister running off to meet him? Where were they off to? Where were they going? It nagged at her like nothing else, an angry red thorn that pulled and pricked at her heart till she felt fit to snap. No matter what Vander said, she didn't trust him. Not after what she'd seen. And so she would follow them. She had to be sure. She would watch. She would wait. She could do nothing else. For now, I don't get it. What's chakra? Powder tilted her head just so, a stray strand of blue hair falling across her face. SHH Naruto held up a finger, but didn't budge from where he sat opposite her, nor did he open his eyes. I need to concentrate. Yet for all that, those closed lids seem to see her all the same. And you need to stay still. I already told you that. Powder shrugged restlessly. He scowled at her. I heard that. Don't move. She stuck out her tongue at him and blew a raspberry, but nevertheless obeyed. No fun. This isn't about fun. His voice dropped an octave, resonating with something she didn't understand. This is dangerous, damn it. If I screw this up, well. His lips pursed in a grimace. It won't be pretty, so let me focus. Blast. She couldn't fault him for that, so she sulked instead. Boo. Naruto didn't answer and so she settled into wait, trying to ignore the pins and needles in her legs. He'd led her out to the yard and bid her to sit down before doing the same. That had been 5 minutes now, 10 more or less, she wasn't sure. She'd never sat still this long. She was used to moving, acting and doing, not whatever this was. Stranger still, he was still holding her hand. Not holding, he was gripping her wrist really. Like a handshake or something. But if this would make her stronger, then surely that was worth it, right? Besides, this was probably safe. Hopefully, maybe. Yo, she jolted as his hand burned white hot against her skin. Heat surged through her elbow, into her shoulder, and poured into her chest. Soon enough it flowed down into the rest of her, leaving a strange tingling sensation in her muscles. What was that? That, blue eyes fluttered open with a tired sigh, was me creating chakra coils in your body. When she didn't deny him, still he continued. They're not something your body was meant to have, so I had to be careful in creating them. His lips pursed. It was difficult. A strange feeling welled up in the pit of her stomach. Almost felt like she was sick. She scratched at her arms. I feel itchy. Not a bad sort of itchy, just itchy. Like she had an itch she couldn't quite scratch. Her body hummed with energy, a faint power she didn't quite understand. It left her restless, knees twisting from side to side in thinly veiled anxiety. Perfectly natural, Naruto climbed to his feet and flicked her forehead, drawing a petulant whine from her. You've not used those coils yet. If you don't, they'll atrophy. All right, that made a lick of sense. But a question persists. Will they make me stronger? With patience and the right training. Those keen orbs narrowed on her intently. Look, kiddo, this is a very important gift. He thrust a finger forth, gently jabbing her shoulder. And not something I gave out lightly. Don't misuse it. You hear? He mistook her silence for acceptance and bowled on. I'm not the best teacher for this sort of thing, but I'll give it my best shot. Just like that. Yup. His smile was pure as the sun. Tears burned in her eyes. Why me, though? Why give me this? She didn't deserve a gift like this. She was a Jinx, a screw-up. Her bombs never worked. She wasn't just unlucky, she was cursed. Surely this would go wrong, too. Naruto faltered a little beneath her teary gaze, coughed into a fist and looked away. 'Cause I made a promise. I don't go back on my word. Powder wanted to believe him. Really, she did until fear reared its ugly head once more. But I always jinx everything. No, his staff slammed down, splitting the earth and startling her alike. Don't talk like that, you're not a jinx. You will never be a jinx. Not if I have anything to say about it. For a fleeting moment he loomed large over her, casting her in his shadow. I've been where you are now. I had nothing, no, less than nothing. Nobody believed in me at first. I had to sacrifice and bleed and sweat and cry to get where I am now. Powder gulped once. But fortunately, I had help. And so will you. When he offered her his hand, she latched onto it. He pulled her upright. We'll start with the basics. His staff clinked down, gently this time. I want you to focus on that itchy feeling in the pit of your stomach. When her brow furrowed, he hastened to explain. That's your chakra. You have it now, but it's next to useless if you don't know how to use it. So we'll start with. But you only have one arm. Her mouth betrayed her, interjecting as her eyes flitted to the nub of his limb. I mean, you can't really teach much with one arm, but. Naruto smirked and raised his stub. A giant golden claw of chakra sprouted from it. Powder balked. As she looked on it, grew in size, easily larger than she was tall. Still smiling, he casually reached over, seized an empty metal barrel and crushed it like a can of soda. The ruined remnants crashed to the dirt at her feet. Wanna run that by me again? Her jaw clicked open. That's wicked. Teach me. Sorry. His eyes flashed once, prompting another gulp from her, a little one this time. This is the one thing I can't teach or give you. Shoot. Powder kicked at the ground. Well, that sucks. I'm still weak, then. Still useless. Perhaps sensing her sorrow, Naruto sighed. His marked hand mussed her hair. Not for long. Now then, ready for your first lesson. Powder perked up and snapped off a salute. Her teacher chortled softly. That a girl. In the weeks that followed, Naruto gradually settled into something of a routine. Maybe not so much a routine as a series of habits, rather, a number of repeated daily actions to help anchor himself in this baffling new realm. Even a world apart, a ninja was still a ninja, and he couldn't bear to sit still for very long. Powder helped in that regard, if only because he enjoyed training her, but he simply couldn't dedicate every second to teaching the little scamp. Thus came the routine. Every morning he woke at 9 sharp. Vander's loft was nice and he was grateful for a place to rest his head, but it lacked anything beyond the most basic of necessities, which meant stumbling down a set of rickety steps for breakfast, munching on whatever the man happened to have on hand at the time, then finding the bathroom and praying there was still enough hot water for a shower. More often than not, there wasn't. Cold showers sucked, but hey, at least they woke you up. From there he would dodge the questions of a certain Sister Violet and find Powder waiting by the bar, eager for the next leg of her training. Except today, she wasn't there. According to Vander, his apprentice had gotten the fool idea to best her personal speedrun record around Zon. Naruto felt something eerily akin to pride at that. She'd gotten an early start. Clever. Points for taking the initiative, he supposed. He wouldn't be seeing her for a few hours, then. The morning was his to with as he pleased. So like any upstanding citizen, he went for a walk. To be fair, he hadn't been looking for trouble at the time. A crude knife poked him in the throat, shattering his reverie. You deft hand over the cloak and your money already, cripple. Its owner's leer left him wrinkling his nose against noxious breath. Do that, and nobody gets hurt. Sadly, trouble had a way of finding him these days. You want to say it, or should I? Kurama put in blackly. Because they're grinding on my last nerve. A faint smile plucked at the corner of the blonde's mouth as he tugged back his hood. Said smile was all teeth. In hindsight, he really had meant what he said earlier. He couldn't spending every second of the day training Powder. But while she was off improving, so too was he working to improve the lives of others. Be it building houses, cleaning up muck, or simply knocking a few heads together, he'd found purpose in helping the impoverished folk down here. Unfortunately, he just couldn't help some people. Case in point, this lot. Blue Eyes took them in at a glance once more, assessing the odd quintet. Rough sort. 3 boys, 2 girls, each wearing ragged clothing with even more tattered weapons. Decent odds. Still, there was a small part of him that wanted to avoid the coming violence. Sentimental sop. Ferocious fur. He quipped back. Deckard, was it? Naruto began outwardly, raising both hands to show himself unarmed and now alarmed the same individuals any more than need be. You don't want to do this. Squinting didn't much help. The kid's face was dirty and bruised Brute's face, which made him somewhat difficult to read. Really, you don't? Why don't we put the knife down and talk this out like adults? He lunged forward mid-sentence, catching the poor excuse for a knife in Chakrinhan's teeth and ripping it away. Deckard stumbled. Naruto bit down hard, shattering it. There. He spat the metal shards at the startled boy's feet. Now, just calm down. A sigh trickled through the air as Deckard landed hard on his rear. If it's food you need, I can help. Rather than accept his charity, the boy scowled and slapped his hand away. Get him, boys. Kurama channeled fresh chakra to him as a shadow loomed over his shoulder. Bang! Naruto's head snapped to the right as a tattooed boy unloaded a round point blank into the back of his head. The round flattered against his glowing skull and struck the street of the alley with a soft pink. He felt no pain, or even discomfort, only brief sensation of movement. With it came a vague sense of disappointment, followed by chagrin. Kids these days, they never learned. The blonde sighed, frowned, rubbed at the sore spot, then shook his head to clear the ringing out of his ears. Not a scratch. Alas, the same couldn't be said for the gun. Even now the pistol was all but bent in the brute's hand, its once rigid barrel bent near in half. As he looked on, his assailant began to pale. Piggish eyes looked at him. Back to the barrel. Back to him once again. Naruto quirked a brow. The braggart stumbled away. He could have slugged him then and there, could have finished things, but that wouldn't have got his point across. Instead he stood his ground as the fool boy babbled. "WW, what are you?" Now, he wagged a finger with a smile. "That was uncalled for, don't you think?" The rest lunged. "Get him." They were still trying to rob him. Really, this was actually happening. "Fine." A sigh trickled into the air. "Have it your own way." Hiram a hand over the cloak. Pearly white teeth flashed in the dark of his mind as his partner hoisted himself upright. "Copy." Deckard had the wherewithal to lean back. "What the hell?" Naruto's body blazed gold as he blurred forward. Light flashed in the alley. Limbs snapped like twigs. His wood robbers screamed, sharp and shrill and short. Calling it a fight would have been generous. It was a beating, plain and simple. Not 30 seconds later he walked over their stunned forms, divesting them of their weapons. His hands flicked out, leaving some coins in directions to the last drop in his wake. Maybe Vander could straighten these kids out. Definitely. Maybe. Hopefully. On a whim Naruto left a stack of golden coins near Deckard's prone face. There. Wouldn't do for the lot of them to starve now, would it? His piece done, he turned to go. "Huh." A rough voice caught him out before he could. "Not a bad show. You know how to handle yourself." Movement flickered in his peripheral vision, near the mouth of the alley. Not quite in the dark, but neither in the light at that. There was someone leaning against a nearby wall, arms folded across their chest. For an awful moment he thought it was Vi, shadowing him again. But no, her voice was all wrong. Sharper, sterner. He straightened, turning to face them fully. "Thanks, I guess." Definitely a woman, and a dangerous-looking one at that. All dark skin, dark eyes, and darker hair, her body wrapped up in worn combat leathers. Yet despite that she held herself with confidence. Her eyes met his for a long moment. When he didn't budge she granted him a crooked grin. "You're that kid, aren't you?" She planted one hand on her hip as she assessed him with a keen eye. "Heard about you. You've been running around the lanes, cracking skulls." More often than he cared to admit, but Naruto knew he couldn't deny the kernel of truth in her words. "You could help all you wanted down here, but sometimes the people in the Undercity needed a good smack to knock some sense into them. Deckard and his crew weren't the first, and they certainly wouldn't be the last." Which begged the question. "And you are Civica." She offered him a hand. "Naruto." He clasped her palm, unable to conceal his frown. "Then I ain't a kid." Apparently this Civica took that as a challenge, because she absolutely crushed his palm in hers. Or rather, she tried. Naruto squeezed right back, grinding her fingers together, gnashing bone against bone until her hand popped open and was forced to release him. Even then he didn't let go of her. Was it wrong for him to relish the look of surprise on her face, the brief gasp that followed yes, no, maybe so, just a little? So he released her with a low drawl. "Still think I'm a kid. Not with a grip like that." The woman smiled. "You're not weak. Good. Zon could use someone like you." A brow quirked. "That a compliment?" "Maybe." She clasped his shoulder, drew back, and walked the way she'd come. Her hand rose in a lazy wave. "See you around." Naruto found himself frowning a little as he watched her retreating form recede into the distance. "Huh," he muttered softly to himself. "Wonder what her deal is." This was power. Powder felt chakra pulse through her veins with every step, heard it sing in her which each leap she made that carried her through. She tasted it on her tongue as she hurtled the through murky Undercity of Zon, grinning from ear to ear. It was a humid afternoon, and she'd never felt more alive. Woo-woo. A great guffaw tore past her lips as she caught a flagpole in midair, spun once, then used her newfound momentum to swing herself upright and continue her short-lived flight. Wind whistled across her body, lashing at her face to send her hair flying, yet her vision had never been clearer. She hurtled through the air in spite of all, heedless of the shouts below, of her own fears, of even gravity itself trying to drag her down to the miserable word below. She wouldn't let it. Her feet hit a dirty rooftop and she immediately launched herself into the air anew. A girl could get drunk on this. Only a month in, and she'd already improved by leaps and bounds. 1 month, and she could run faster, hit harder, last longer than most kids twice her age. Because at the end of the day, chakra was power. Not just any power, but real power, the kind adults would kill for. And it was all hers. She swore she'd do her best to prove worthy of the gift she'd been granted. Hell, maybe she ought to show Echo one of these days. He'd get a kick out of this. Surely Naruto wouldn't mind, maybe he could even give. A sharp whistle pierced the fog of her thoughts from the streets, drawing a silly little smile to her lips. Oi, a familiar voice boomed up at her. Powder. She spied a flash of gold below and found her mentor looking up at her. She also saw the twitching bodies sprawled out at his feet and a dark-skinned woman walking away from the lot of them. He dropped the cloak but kept his false arm going, using it to wave her way. A golden finger crooked at her, beckoning once, his intent clear. Powder's smirk became an outright grin as she realized what must have transpired below. Someone had tried to mug him again. They never learned. But who was the scary lady? Looking at her made Powder's heart twitch, and not at all in a pleasant manner. The newcomer didn't deign to look her way. It was like she didn't even exist to her. Weird. Scowling, she shoved the awful feeling aside and vaulted down to meet her mentor. Well, he asked. How did you do? She alighted in a pointed crouch, wincing only a little at the impact. Eager blue eyes rose to meet his. Beat my record by 3 seconds. Well done. His smile was immediate, the grin a delighted teacher might impart onto their pupil. You're getting faster. A rough hand descended to tousle her hair. I'm proud of you, Powder. 5 little words, yet they made her shiver. Most people called her a Jinx. Even those who didn't vie, Vander, Echo rarely said that to her. And yet for all that Naruto gave his praise freely, doling out compliments left and right when she surpassed his expectations, and she often did left, right, and center. He had no idea just how much those words meant a child. She swallowed once, to steady herself and marshaled her courage. Could you say that again? A confused blink, but he granted her request. Sure, I'm proud of you. Why wouldn't I be? Hell. Glee held the life in her heart and she pumped a clenched fist in the air. Thanks, told you I could do it. No problem. His hand fell away and his golden claw vanished into motes of dust. Never doubted you. You really are a natural at this. Silence stretched between the two of them as she leaned into his hand. Even then it wasn't enough. She shifted restlessly, knees twisting to and fro. Su, she stretched out the word, can you teach me a jutsu, now? It was like flicking a switch. Naruto's face closed down at once. Powder no. Aw, come on, she grit her teeth. I already know how to walk on walls, you taught me how to hit hard and run really fast. True, he allowed, but can you walk on water? Powder fell back, blinked, then perked up, all in the same moment. Was he actually serious? Nuha. She scowled at him. No way, that's a thing. You're pulling my leg. Naruto's smirk was nothing short of sly. Tell you what, let's make a bet. Someone's making mincemeat of our boys, boss. Silco looked up from his glass. Is that so? It wasn't any of his concern. None of it was. Not yet. Cold. Powder yelped as she lost her footing for the umpteenth and plunged beneath the surface of the river. She flailed to the surface, snarling and spitting. Credit where it was due, she tried. She really did. She just wasn't able to get a proper foothold on the water. She managed one foot, lost her balance, and splashed into the water again. Remind you of someone. Naruto coughed into a fist to hide his embarrassment. Even so, he gave Powder another 10 seconds before he took pity on his poor pupil and plucked her up by the scruff of the neck. She glared at him, looking about as dangerous as a kitten. A sopping wet kitten. This isn't something you can learn in one day, kiddo. He laughed a little when she flailed a leg at him. Don't rush it. Tintushi coughed. Heck. Come on. A wry smile tugged at his whiskered cheeks. Let's get you dried off. It's been hours, now. Powder sagged in his grasp. But I want to keep trying, she said in a weak, fawning voice. No buts. Naruto chortled a little as he waded back to the shore, dragging the kicking girl with him. The water of lanes wasn't the cleanest, but it suited his purpose. Theoretically, Powder would be fine so long as she wasn't cut or bleeding when she went in. He'd made certain of that. A quick application of heated air on the banks had her right as rain again, though no less pleased. You're bigger than me, she flung a pebble his way. No fair. Oi. Naruto flicked her forehead gently, not to hurt or harm, just enough to catch her attention, something a mentor might do to their student. Remember rule number 1. She huffed and crossed both arms before her chest. Ninja don't fight fair. Bingo. He sat down, tugged his scroll from his pouch, and unfolded it before her. At your age, I was a runt too, even shorter than you are now. Her eyes widened. No way. Yes, way. He wrinkled his nose at her, recalling just how short he'd been at her age. It's not something I'm proud of. But you're freaking tall now, how? He stuck out his tongue. I drank lots of milk. Boss, she gave an angry huff. Fine, don't tell me. I hate being little. Don't be in such a hurry to grow up, Powder. He could see where she was coming from, but felt the need to warn her regardless. Enjoy being a kid while you can. Yeah, no shit. I mean it. A flick of his wrist and he reached out to tweak her nose, earning a baleful look from her. You're gonna grow up before you know it. Just like he had. And once you do, you'll have responsibilities. Even now, you're stronger than you know. How little she knew. His words had her squinting at him regardless. You sound like Violet. Then she gives good advice. Naruto craned his head a millimeter to the right as a faint noise caught his ear. And she should really stop eavesdropping. A faint curse and the rapid sound of retreating feet scampered away. Again Powder made a face in that direction. That's like the 3rd time this week. Don't be too hard on her. Naruto patted her still damp head, drawing a pleased hum from her. She's just worried about you, like any good sister should be. Don't fault her for it. Ugh, at that, she squirmed away with a groan. Now you sound like Vander, less talk, more training. Kurama chortled softly. Isn't she an eager one? Still, something in her face gave them pause. What's wrong? Powder tucked her knees into her chest and buried her head there. She muttered something incomprehensible. A blonde brow rose. Wanna run that by me again? Tentatively, she raised her gaze. Are you gonna give her chakra, too? Hey, Naruto found himself blinking at that. Where in blazes did that come from? It's just she looked down, worrying her lower lip between her teeth. She's strong. Real strong. Stronger than me. Faster, too. She's tough. He scoffed. And you're not. I didn't say that, she snapped back. It just keeps trying to talk to you, and you chose me. She grit her teeth. It's not fair. She has so much already, and now she's trying to mess with the one thing that she bit her tongue to cut herself off, but not before he heard her words. She should stay away. Kurama offered a low rumble of amusement. Oh, someone's jealous. Was she? Naruto couldn't be sure. Truth be told, he barely even knew Violet. Certainly not enough to trust her with something like this. She seemed keen to watch over Powder, and while that was certainly a quality to cultivate, she'd also proven herself doggedly persistent where family was concerned. Unbidden, one such inquiry floated up from the depths of his mind. What do you want with my sister? She'd asked him. I'm just keeping a promise, he'd replied. If you hurt her, you'll regret it. It was that very same persistence that made him wonder. Did he teach Vi? Would it make Powder happy, sad, mad? It might even be something for the sisters to bond over. But he didn't like the look there in Powder's eyes. She was eyeing him with an air of trepidation, as though she were afraid of something. But what suddenly he didn't feel so good about offering an olive branch to Violet. Not yet, at least. She was clearly a brawler like him, and while there was plenty he could impart to her, Powder's expression genuinely concerned him. If he said the wrong thing here, this fragile little girl might snap. Who knew what might happen then? The gift of foresight often eluded him, but something told him not to dismiss Powder's fears out of hand. She wouldn't take kindly to it. No, best not risk it. Just appease her for now. In the end he settled for a shrug. Can't say. Don't know her well enough. I'm plenty busy with you. Apparently, it was the right thing to say. Powder slumped with a relieved sigh. All the tension bled out of her. All right. She stammered out a nervous laugh. Forget I said anything. So quick as a flash, she grinned again. Training, what's next? All right, all right. Naruto relented with a self-same smile as she clambered to her feet. Have it your way. If she wanted to learn things well, he supposed he could move on to something a little more advanced. Sage knew he had enough knowledge crammed into his head at the moment. Let's see. Powder squirmed with anticipation. Her smile soured into a frown as he held up a finger. Today, we're going to learn about elemental affinities. A brow quirked at the homemade grenades on her belt. Though something tells me yours is going to lean toward fire. A thought occurred to him and he grimaced. Or lightning. Maybe both. You might even develop a line I'm not aware of. A shrug. Time will tell, I guess. There was a silence. And then, Powder's smile returned tenfold. Sweet. Their lessons would continue long into the night. Powder had never been prouder. Why wouldn't she be? As far as she was concerned, she had every right to grin like a loon, and frankly, she didn't care who stared at her. Let Vi worry. Let Milo scowl. Let Klager balk. Just thinking about what she'd done today, what she had accomplished, put a spring in her step. Why, you ask, what was the reason for all this merry madness? Nothing simpler. Because the heist had gone off without a hitch. That's right, chase aside, they'd gotten off scot-free. Well, mostly, basically, pretty much. So what if they'd ransacked a Piltover penthouse and run from the a few enforcers? You couldn't get an omelet without breaking a few eggs. They were fine. Everyone was just fine. They each had a sack of loot to their names, and the enforcers hadn't been able to catch them. Really, her only regret was that she hadn't had a chance to showcase her sick new skills. Would it have been too much to ask for a few guards to fight? Yes, no, maybe so. Regardless, she couldn't help but preen as she sling her sack of ill-gotten gains over one shoulder. She was somebody now. Not a Jinx. No, never a Jinx. No matter what Milo said. Screw Milo. What did he know? And besides, it wasn't like anyone had noticed beyond a few enforcers. Why did she feel like she was forgetting something? A distant explosion echoed behind them. She winced. Oh, right. That. You seen the kids? Nope. Naruto kept his eyes on the scroll before him, never once looking up as Vander closed the attic door behind him. They're kids, Vander, not baby birds. Let him stretch their wings once in a while. He traced a thin line across it, then frowned when the ink smoldered away. Blast it. He'd never been the best at sealing. They're probably running around the lanes. Nothing to worry about. Easy for you to say. Distantly he heard the reformed gangster pull up a chair. You only deal with Powder for a few hours. I've got to corral all 4 of the little buggers every day. Was it Powder? Was a handful to keep track of at the best of times. And really, it was 2. Vi seemed determined to keep an eye on him. He didn't know about the boys, they avoided him like the plague, but the sisters were difficult enough to deal with on a good day. They're good kids, he muttered, tracing another black line on the parchment. This one held when he applied chakra to it. A smile creased his whiskered visage. Just give him a chance. I could say the same about you. The man must have lit his pipe, because his nose caught the faint scent of smoke in the air. Powder looks up to you. Don't squander that. I won't. What's the worst that could happen? A beat of silence stretched between the two men. Vander sighed into it. You do realize you just jinxed it, right? By the blonde scoffed, rolled up his scroll, and pivoted to face him. Silly superstition. I didn't jinx anything. A faint tremor rattled the world. Both men paused. Naruto palmed his forehead with a sigh. Maybe I spoke too soon. Take no prisoners, boys. Strange as it might sound, Powder was grateful when Deckard and his gang jumped them. He and his poorly named bullies were nothing less than nothing, but it finally gave her a chance to shine. No more running. No more being the useless little sister, the Jinx, the one everyone hated. Today she fought back. Deckard lunged at her with a snarl. Gimme the loot, you little shit. Violet shouted a warning, probably fearing the worst. She needn't have worried. Deckard dove, to which Powder dodged back. He made a blind grab for the sack she held. The move was obvious, telegraphed even, and she responded accordingly. His hand swept down, fingers clenched into a claw. Powder's hand slashed up. Bone cracked and he recoiled, clutching 2 broken fingers. I'll skin you alive. She beckoned. Gotta catch me first, ugly. Adrenaline spurred him onward as he surged after her. Powder didn't fight. She danced, swaying in and out of his loping strikes, giving ground to her adversary, yet it was on her terms that she did so. Hers, not his. When she retreated, she did so knowing precisely where she was going, guiding him to the point he failed to see. Never use your gifts to be cruel. Naruto's voice ran in her head. He'd been quite clear on that front. Do you understand? Powder, when you do fight, make it clean. She dodged aside, losing a strand of blue hair as a wild fist hurtled past. A smile touched her lips. Of course she understood. Yup, she understood perfectly. This wasn't cruelty now, was it? This was self-defense. She was defending herself from an idiot who didn't know any better. And besides, Deckard was so very slow. Had he always been this slow, or was she just that much faster? His fists scythed through the air in uncoordinated arcs, any one of which would have knocked the wind right out of hair if they connected. Big if that. Now, I may not don't have the eyes, Naruto's voice came back to her in an instant, but I know enough to take someone down without hurting them too bad. You see, it's all in the pressure points. Deckard's right arm whistled past and Powder stepped up, driving two top fingers into the point near the base of his shoulder. The limb dropped loose at his side. He balked at it, unable to understand what just happened to him. The moment he did, his face turned an alarming shade of red. He ripped a knife from his belt, and if that doesn't take him down, well, just hit him harder. Always worked for me. Powder took a stance just as she'd been taught. A quick hop carried her forward. Her right hand clenched into a fist, and she let it fly. Deckard never her coming. How could he? The larger boy was still winding up when she nailed him. One moment he was bearing down on her with a crazed look in his eye. In the next, Powder swayed back with deceptive grace, weaving left and right like water, leaving his knife to sweep harmlessly past. Then her eyes flashed and she slammed a fist into Deckard's stomach with all her might. The larger boy folded over her outstretched limb with a grunt, retching for air. Ribs didn't just crack. He was still gasping when a rousing uppercut caught him in the chin. She felt something shatter under her fist. The impact launched him into a wall. The boy slid down it and dropped like a sack of potatoes, wheezing softly. Clagger gaped. Wow, Milo whistled. Harem. Vi found herself frowning. Since when can you do that? Powder gripped her wrist, hiding her hand behind her back. Since a while ago. Naruto was waiting at the last drop when they returned. Vander wasn't with him. Somehow, that made it worse. So much worse. Those normally gentle blue eyes were hard and stern, both arms crossed before his chest. One foot tapped impatiently against the floor. He didn't have to say anything. One look was all it took. His head jerked toward the back door. Powder peeled off from her siblings and followed him, heedless of Vi's protests. Said protests died when he planted a hand between her shoulders and guided her in one of the back room. He steered her to a chair, sat her down, and crouched before her. What did you do? Powder wilted a little on the inside. All right, but you can't be mad at me. I'm not mad. He patted her head. I'd just like to know what you did. She gulped once, marshaled her courage. We hit a house. Did you? Naruto quirked a brow. Any good loot? Powder opened the heavy sack she had. A low whistle was her reward. All that training really paid off. Her grin was nothing short of euphoric. I kicked ass, and look at these. She held up a trio of tiny glowing spheres. Aren't they pretty? Naruto eyed them with an air of dread. What were those? Dunno. Really? She didn't. Can I keep them? He didn't answer that. Instead, he hit her with another question. Did you have anything to do with that explosion in the upper city? Silence reigned between them. Powder wanted to tell him more. She really did. But she couldn't. She absolutely did not dare. Vander was going to be plenty cross with Vi already, and more news might make him explode. Especially once he learned of the explosion. Why had it been delayed? She had been careful with the shiny stones. Sure, she might have dropped one when she ran, but why would it take so long to explode? She was missing something here, but she was just a kid. Damn it, how was she supposed to know? Naruto sighed into the silence. You know, I taught you better than this. That tore it. Powder warbled once and surged forward. I'm sorry. Her head slammed into his stomach. I won't do it again, I promise. If you just teach me more stuff, I wouldn't have to. Naruto tensed for a moment. Eventually, he deflated. You can't learn everything I know. Not yet. His fist curled around a mote of light, stifling it. Absolutely not. Things like the Rasenshuriken are too dangerous. But you said you'd teach me. He could feel the thorns in her voice. You promised. Just like that, she changed gears. Please, 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 can I at least learn the Rasengan? Fine. His face softened into a careworn smile. I can try to teach you that, at least. Powder dared a tentative grin. Everything would be all right, wouldn't it? The very next day, the enforcers hit the lanes. Naruto had never seen something so ridiculous as an enforcer before. Needless to say, he wasn't impressed. Not one bit. To be fair, the police of Piltover may have appeared imposing to ordinary folk, large and looming, clad in heavy armor fused to their clothes. Anonymous faces hid behind large goggles fused to bulky rebreathers, each of which there lent their every breath a menacing, rasping quality. But that's all they were. Men in armor. Toy soldiers. Armor hadn't stopped him back in the elemental nations, and it was hardly going to impede him now if it came to a fight. He saw them in the streets, scoffed, and kept walking. Besides, the purpose of their visit was clear. If their brusqueness didn't give it away, their emotions and the man leading them all but threw that notion to the wolves. They were looking for someone. Several someones. Weren't being too subtle with their questions either. Even a blind man could tell who they were after. Can you blame them? Powder and the rest were hardly subtle. Only makes sense they'd be hunted. Ugh, he pinched the bridge of his nose to stifle an oncoming migraine. Don't remind me. A fresh commotion ahead caught his attention. Evidently they were interrogating someone. Couldn't see who from this angle. Still, there were only 5 of them, 4 heavily armored and 1 not so. An interrogator or some such. He knew he could clear them out, but technically they weren't doing anything wrong. A slight shrug rolled his shoulders. Guess I'm taking the long way today. Powder would understand once he explained himself. Hey, a sudden yelp had him turning back again, just in time to spy a familiar crop of pink hair in the guard's grasp. His first instinct was to ignore it. Really, what were the chances? Slim to none. There was just no way his luck was that. Then he glimpsed the rest of her and realization dawned, just as he saw her right arm locked in an enforcer's grip. Why, she matches the description. One of the enforcers was visible, his eyes, at the very least. Take her. Nope, not having that. Are we doing this right here, right now? Of course they were. Powder would never let him live it down if he walked away now. 3 quick strides carried him forward, then 3 more. By the 6th, chakra was already surging through his veins. He didn't so much walk as he did glide forward. Even with 1 arm, it was the simplest thing to slip in between the men. They didn't even notice him until he was among them, grinning from ear to ear. Hey, now he bodily interposed himself between them and prized her out of the enforcer's grasp. There you are. I was looking all over for you. You led me worried. Violet sputtered. Now wait just a second. Honestly, Naruto most certainly did not and talked right over her. Kids these days. Don't mind me, just picking up my daughter. We'll be on our way now, isn't that right, kiddo? Vi nodded, but glared red daggers at him, promising death if he called her his offspring again. A hand came down on his shoulder, stopping them short. Either the half-masked enforcer regarded him balefully. Do you live here? No. Naruto plastered a smile to his face. I'm afraid we don't. Just passing through, friend. I don't like your tone. So much for the easy way out. If they were going to force this, they'd be sorely disappointed. No, a tilt of the head followed. But I was being polite. Thought you law and order types like that. The man made a grab for him. Listen here, you. Naruto batted the hand away. Don't touch what you can't afford. I like this jacket. It was almost worth it to see his face purple like that. Hands off. You're not going anywhere. The pompous little man tried to shove him and failed miserably. Identify yourself. Sure. He was all too happy to make a scene with so many eyes on him. I'm Naruto, and you are. Not yours, you blithering oaf. Naruto feigned a gasp. Did you forget your own name? How sad. Vi snorted and the younger enforcer paused, realizing he'd been had. I know my name, damn it. You don't seem terribly bright. And that name would be Marcus. Had he ever been this hot-headed, he already knew the answer. Just thinking about it shamed him. All right, then, Marcus, he began slowly, choosing each word with infinite care. You don't want to do this. It's clearly a case of mistaken identity, so let's just let bygones be bygones and... The largest of the enforcers stepped forward. He was a great big brute of a man, easily a head taller than him, brimming with muscle. Naruto felt a tiny flicker of hostility long before he resolved himself to act. Even so, he stood his ground. With his good arm, he pushed Violet behind him. Don't, he warned, looking up at him. Be smart about this. An arm swung back, ponderously, slow, so very slow. He could have dodged it any number of ways, taken the fist and the arms besides. Those of the lanes might even praise him for such savagery. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and evil for evil. Blue eyes narrowed, shimmering with a sliver of gold as he pulled on the natural energy in the air. Not a heartbeat later, clenched knuckles plowed into his face. Ugh! And the enforcer dropped to his knees with a shriek as every bone in his fist shattered. Anger sparked to life in him, burning bright and white-hot. They were still screaming when a kick caught his chin and laid him out flat. So uncivilized. Listen, friend. Naruto cracked his neck, rolled his eyes, and turned to face him. Do you really want to do this dance? What the hell was that? Marcus stumbled back, eyes wide. Who are you? I'm just a simple man making his way in the world, like my father before me. He tutted and started forward. Another enforcer lunged. He kicked backward like a mule, launching them into their wounded comrade, never once breaking eye contact. You think you know what strength is, what monsters are? He stood before Marcus, looming in a way he hadn't in ages. You have no idea. I've got one inside me. He tapped a finger to his stomach. He's begging me to kill you. Him not. SHHH, just let me scare him off. Outwardly, he smiled. So why don't you just... A black baton cracked down on the back of his head hard enough to make him bite his tongue. Steel met skull and snapped in half. A faint noise of disbelief trickled through the third enforcer's mask. Naruto craned his neck back to regard them. Though those heavy goggles and helm hid his face, he felt the man's confusion keenly as his own anger. That's the way, he tutted. Keep trying, keep trying. His knee crashed upward and embedded itself in the man's torso. He folded like a wet paper bag, slumping at his feet. A quick stomp on his armored skull put him out of commission entirely. Where once there had been 5, now there were only 2. Marcus and his single guard, the latter of which reached for their rifle. It was a large, unwieldy thing, of little use at close range. No chance of killing him. You look nervous. Naruto cooed at him, crooking 2 fingers forward. What's wrong? Want me to praise you? He was still speaking. Enforcer shot him point blank in the face. Not a bad shot. Quick, lethal, to the point. His head snapped back from the sheer momentum of it as a wisp of smoke filled the air. Vi screamed until his head swung back down, bullet clutched between his teeth. The funny thing is, Naruto bit down hard, shattering the casing between sharpened incisors. Under any other circumstance, you might have a point there. He turned his head aside to spit out the ruined remains of the round. Let me offer my counterpoint. His eyes blazed. Killing intent spiked. Run. Every semblance of color drained from Marcus's face. At his side, the final enforcer fainted dead away, leaving him alone. His resolve wavered, wilted as he realized everyone was looking at him. Some were reaching for their weapons. One of them drew a sword and that was it. He turned and ran like a kicked dog, tail between his legs. His comrades were left behind to the mercy of the lanes. This isn't over, he howled over his shoulder. Just you wait. Naruto winged a pebble at his back and sent him stumbling. Yes, it is. Vi coughed into a fist behind him. Oops, he'd been so wrapped up in his act that he'd clear forgotten about her. Relax, he pivoted and plastered a smile to his face. You're safe now. She slapped his hand aside and rounded on him with a snarl. Why did you let them go? You should have finished them off. Why, he didn't see the point in it. They're beaten. The young girl flung up her arms. They'll just come back. His lips pursed. Not if they know what's good for them, they won't. She tore her gaze away. Their kind never know. Silence stretched between them, and for an awful moment he wondered if he'd done something wrong. Beating up a few pompous guards was one thing, but he was hardly about to kill men and women in cold. That just wasn't his way. That she thought it was concerned him more than words. Would you rather I kill them? Yes, Vi answered without hesitation. And keep killing anyone who might be a threat. If they're going to storm the lanes, then you should. And I suppose I should keep killing from there, he hummed on, until everyone suffered just the same as you. Vi went silent, her mouth sealing into a thin, angry line of defiance. Well, he planted a hand on his up. Is that what you want? She didn't answer, bless her simple soul, but she didn't give up either. Instead, she sought a new avenue of attack. Teach me, then. Naruto's smile died an ugly death. Excuse me. I said teach me. She latched onto his lone arm, tugging at his sleeve with surprising force for one so young. Like you taught Powder, you made her strong enough to take on someone twice her size and win. When he didn't answer immediately, she wilted under his state. Whatever gift you gave my sister, I want it. No, I need that. You made her strong. Tell me how you did it. Please, I'm begging you. Naruto reared back. Well, wasn't this familiar? Powder was always strong, he said instead, dodging the question. I just helped her. Why should I teach you? What do you intend to with chakra, assuming I give it to you? An awful thought dawned as he gazed overlong at the surly girl clinging to him. Vander had given him a spotty recollection of the kids and their past, but here and now, he saw anger in Vi's eyes. Spite. A burning need to lash out, craving vengeance. He didn't like that. No sir, not at all. You remind me of an old friend. He frowned at her. He wanted power too, though his reasons were a bit different than yours. It didn't end well for him. I just want to protect my sister. That's maybe part and parcel why you seek power, but we both know there's more to it than that, don't we? She didn't deny it, leaving him to bull onward. Vander told me enough. You want vengeance for your parents, for the life that was stolen from you and Powder. You want to make Piltover hurt, the way the two of you were hurt. And what if I do? He shook his head. Let it go. She sucked in a breath so raw it sounded painful to hear. What? No, never. Screw you then, I'll find another. A golden claw burst from the stump of Naruto's ruined arm and slammed into Vi, pinning her to a wall before she could run. I said you've got to forget about revenge. He tightened his grip on her when she tried to struggle. I've met so many people who had the same look in their eyes as you do now. Baleful eyes blazed at an unpleasant memory. Trust me, for those who follow the path of revenge, it never ends well. You'll only tear yourself apart. Shut up. I will not. And even if you succeed with your revenge, what would you have then? I'll tell you what. He drawled. Nothing. Emptiness. Easy for you to say. Her eyes flashed as she snarled up at him. You have no idea what we've lost, what we've suffered, what we've done to survive down here. Maybe if you lost everything in your life, your parents, your friends, your family, maybe then I'd listen to you. Naruto flinched. You killed me, Naruto. Hate to break it to you, but you're a little late on that front. Was it wrong to feel a flash of petty spite when she winced? Maybe because he did. Everyone you're talking about has already been killed. Violet recoiled, looking like he'd slapped her across the face. You're not the only one who knows what it's like to lose somebody. He crouched down before her and patted her head. It was a testament to her shock that she didn't try to escape. Thankfully, you're not all that bad off as you think. You still have your sister, don't you? Maybe be a little nicer to her. Yes, she adores you, you know. Tan fingers tweaked her cheek, drawing a growl from her. Come to think of it, you have Clagger and Milo, not to mention Vander, too. Sure, you lost your birth parents, but I think they'd be happy to know you're not alone and like me. What about you? What about me? He sighed. I don't even have those anymore. There it was, the painful truth, the misery he'd been avoiding for so long. My parents are gone. I probably killed my best friend on accident, and I have no way of getting back to my world. She hiccuped. But your world is here. He jabbed her collarbone with a finger. Don't lose sight of it. Not for anything. Tears stung at her eyes. I hate you. No, you hate the truth. He released Kurama's claw and let her slump to the ground, gasping for air. Be grateful for what you have, Vi. Don't throw it away for the sake of revenge. She struggled to her hands and knees and flopped forward, weeping onto the floor. See you around, kiddo. Be good. As Peace said, he turned his back on her. Wait, she called out as he slipped away. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. He raised a hand over his head and kept walking. Vi tried to follow such a silly girl, but he lost her in the crowd. Everyone gave him a wide berth after that. Perhaps they sensed his mood. Maybe they knew better than to mess with a man like him. Just as well. If they tried now, he'd absolutely thrash them. You all right? No, he wasn't. Not at all. Damn it. He palmed his face. I need a drink. Naruto looked tired. That was Powder's first thought when he strolled into the den some hours later. Dark circles loomed around his eyes, a telltale sign of his exhaustion. But it was more than that. His shoulders almost seemed to slump, as if bowing beneath the weight of some terrible burden. He'd be all right, of course. He always was. He was Naruto, for crying out loud. Nothing put him down. Not for long. You all right? She pulled out a chair for him to sink into. Heard you got into a fight. Everybody's buzzing about it. Did you? Now he patted her head and didn't elaborate further. I ran into your sister again. Vi. Powder fought down a stab of dread. What did she want? Blue eyes drilled into hers. For me to train her. Dread became fear. You said, no, right. His head bobbed. She's not ready. Powder didn't ever want her to be ready. This was hers. Selfish as it might sound, she didn't want to share this with anyone else. It made her feel powerful, respected, unique. If Naruto up and started training Vi, then he would pay less attention to her. Worse, her sister would probably surpass her. Vi was always good at things. Everything she couldn't do, couldn't say, couldn't be. Naruto might even start mentoring Clagger and Milo, and then where would she be the runt of the litter again? How's the training going? Those words cut into her, and not in a good way. She sulked at the bitter reminder and flung herself down into a chair. Nowhere fast. I can't do it. Do what? The racing in what else? It's too hard. Relax. He claimed the throw pillow opposite her and plunked down onto it. It took me a while to get the hang of this, even longer to get it down pat. A hand came down to tousle her hair. You're making great progress for your age. No, she ducked out from under his hand. I mean, I can't do it. Teach me something else. A foxy brow rose. Powder. Her face burned. Please. The weight of his gaze was a physical thing, but she sat straight beneath it. Naruto respected those who held firm to their beliefs. She'd learned that early on. So long as she had a concrete reason for her beliefs and told him the reasons behind them, he would listen to her. He always did. Eventually he yielded. Well, I could try to teach you that. Powder perked up. That, Kakashi-sensei told me the basics once, but I couldn't do it. Had next to no skill at it myself. He sounded almost sheepish. Embarrassed, even. Her hand rose. What's a sensei? Naruto favored her with a tired smile. In my world, it means teacher. Realization dawned. A hint of happy pink hit her cheeks. Teacher. He really was, wasn't he? He'd taught her so much, and in the years to come, she'd learn much more. She had a goal in him now, a secret one she refused to speak of. Not here. Not yet. Not until she was older. She thumbed her nose instead. Neat. So what are you gonna teach me? Careful, now. He flicked her forehead. There's a caveat. I'll do anything. You're not allowed to use this jutsu on friends or family, not in training or anything else. A tan finger rose. Only me. I'm fast enough to dodge it. They aren't. Do you understand? After that affinity training we did, you probably have the right stuff for this. Even so, I want your word. Why was he being so serious all of a sudden? Still her head bobbed. No, I don't think you do. He crouched down, the better to look her in the eye. If you misuse this for selfish means, he jabbed her shoulder with said finger, if you turn this technique on Vander, anyone who isn't genuinely trying to take your life, then I will take your chakra away. Her ran cold. Naruto had never said those words to her before. The idea of being powerless again terrified her. She'd be a nothing. Nobody. No one. Not that. Anything but that. Chakra defined her, everything that she was. Without it, what was she? Nothing. Just poor powerless Powder. Her bombs and traps still didn't work. And if he took this power from her, no, she'd rather die. I promise. She warbled, hooking her little finger around his. I won't let you down. Pinky promise. Naruto stared at her intently, judging her. His eyes traveled to their interlocked fingers. Something flashed through his gaze, an emotion he couldn't read. She wasn't sure he wanted to. Did he have a bad experience with this jutsu in the past? That was the only thing she could think of. Whatever the case, he didn't speak of it. At length, he nodded. Will you keep trying to learn the racing, and at least I'm sure you can learn. Not why likely, but for his sake, she'd continue to try. All right, here. He held out his hand. Give me your right arm. She did so without hesitation, not even a little. Clench your fingers into a claw. Powder did so. Now grip your wrist like so. He mimed the motion, gripping his own tight. Like this. Her brow furrowed. I don't feel anything. Because you haven't done anything yet. Low laughter rumbled in her ears. Take a stance and close your eyes. No hesitation. Why would she? She trusted him implicitly. Good. He nudged her arm a little, humming softly as she kept her eyes closed. Now I want you to channel as much chakra as you can to your palm and keep it there. Easy enough. Imagine it as a blade. Do you see it? The sharpest blade you can possibly think of. His voice guided her in the dark. A sword to protect, to cut through anyone and anything that would hurt your family. Do you have that image in your mind? Yup. She heard him scoff. Yup, she says. Kids these days no grasp it. Powder complied. Something sparked to life in her. She yelped, despite herself. Sparks burned her vision behind closed lids and roared in her ears, like 1,000 birds chirping in unison. She heard Naruto gasp, to which her eyes snapped open. And she saw bright blue light, such a sight as to sear her eyes. A tiny ember of excitement sprang to life in her chest. It was beautiful, easily the prettiest thing she'd ever seen. Better than the brightest blast, than the most exciting explosion. I did it. Her concentration faltered in her glee, taking her control with it. Her jutsu fizzled out into harmless sparks, but still it had lasted for a moment, yet she saw. All right. Naruto leaned back and exhaled softly. That's great, Powder. I didn't think you'd manage it on your first try. Why did he sound so concerned? You really do pick this up quickly. He prattled on, running a hand through his hair. Give it a few months and we'll have it down. Still, I'm putting another rule on you for now, just in case. She blinked. Another one. To make sure you don't use this until you're ready. His hands came down on her shoulders. Promise me you won't use it frivolously. Her head bobbed in a quick, jerky nod. Is that a girl? Now, let's move on to something a little safer. His smile returned in earnest. How you feel about a little theory in sage training? Powder's hand shot up again. Question, what's a sage? Naruto's smile was all teeth. You're about to learn. Are you certain about this, boy? Deckard clutched the vial of shimmer in his fist. He humiliated made a fool of Mam, and that brat of his I'll kill them. Another drink slid across the counter. A hand snatched it up. Downed it. Naruto slammed it back down. Another. Vander complied with a rueful smile. Trouble in paradise. He received a middle finger salute for his troubles flipped. She's learning too fast. Powder. The blonde's glare drilled a hole in his head. Cheeky bugger, but he was in no mood for games tonight, it seemed. That was his 9th glass in as many minutes, and he was still only slightly tipsy. His body burned off the booze faster than he could consume it. I've never been a teacher before. He sloshed the drink in the glass around, slurring a little. I'm pants at this. I know all these techniques and tricks, but in it, I just want her to do well. I want to see her strive, thrive, excel. Is that wrong? No, the former brawler allowed, but from I've been hearing, she's drawing attention to herself was getting around. You need to set limits. I have. Naruto buried his head in his arms. I wouldn't teach her the literal definition of a nuke. Even made her swear to keep her from using jutsu selfishly. Just thinking of it made him wince. If she doesn't keep her word, she will. Girl's got a crush on you. Naruto recoiled. Seriously, she's a kid around, also your kid. Maybe now, he chortled. But give her a few years, maybe a decade. Let her grow up. Might be surprised. For a fleeting moment he pictured her in the far-flung future. Long blue braids, an impish smile, bright eyes that flashed like a gay treachery. No. He tried to stand, then thought better of it when his legs protested. We are not having this conversation. An ugly thought occurred to him, and if you're talking about limits, you need to have a long chat with Violet, pretty damn soon, too. Vander frowned. What's wrong with Vi? Incredulity sparked to life in him. You don't know she's obsessed with. His sixth sense shrilled a warning too late. He was only just beginning to pivot. The pub door crashed open behind him. Likewise, he sensed the enforcers coming and pivoted back, hunching down, reducing his profile long before they approached the bar. Even then he had an instant to take them in. 10 of them this time. And leading them, well, some fools never learn. Oblivious to it all, Vander leaned past him. Even in, officer. He smiled, wholly at his ease. What can I get you? Marcus, because of course it was him, remained silent for a long moment. At length, he spoke. 4 street rats will do. Search the place. Naruto went still as a guard bowled past him. The kids were just downstairs. If they were discovered, Vander didn't falter, not even for a moment. I can't say I know any street rats. What about you, kid? Naruto blew out a sigh. Nope, I don't have time for you. Marcus finally noticed him then, his irritating glare turned downright murderous. You've got some nerve hanging around here after what you did this morning. I'll have you in irons this time. Kurama was of a different opinion. Can I eat him? Naruto nearly snorted into his glass. No idea what you're talking about. He took another drink to fortify himself and hide his laughter. I'm afraid topsider business isn't my concern. It's every one of you trenchers' concern now. The little man actually dared to slap the glass clear out of his hand. Look at me when I'm talking to you. Naruto didn't. Instead, his eyes followed the tumbling glass and the sweet release it offered. It struck the floor and shattered, taking his hopes of a peaceful night with it. A low roar rose in his ears. He'd been enjoying that drink, reveling in the simple pleasure of not having to think for once. Behind him, he physically felt Vander wince. Dimly, he became aware of the man speaking, saying something. It almost sounded like don't do it, but surely that couldn't be right. No. Listen to me. An open palm cracked across his face, snapping him back to reality. He blinked and found Marcus looming over him. Or, well, trying to loom. He wasn't terribly good at it. Give me a name and this all goes away. I'll even forget your little mistake. Vander groaned. Naruto inhaled sharply through his nose. Sure, he hummed. I'll give you 2. Simir. Marcus leaned in. Naruto reached around, grabbed the bottle from the counter, and broke it over the man's head. It made a very nice sound as it shattered, he thought. More so the noise the booze made as it soaked his uniform through. Screw you. You people down here are all the same. He stumbled back, sputtering. Mistaking arrogance for bravery. You think you're standing up for something. Naruto tilted his head. Yeah, I'm thinking I am. You aren't his adversary, sneered back. You're just a small man in a little hole the world forget to bury. His gaze roved over the lot of them, one hand snapping to the baton at his waist. And I'm gonna bury the lot of you. Bigger mean than you have tried. Naruto raised his head, knowing full well what was about to transpire. You know what I see when I look at you? Tired blue eyes met his. A big fish in a little pond, with his little words, blowing his little bubbles, never once realizing the danger. Because you see, now, he's not in a pond at all. This is the ocean. Vander heaved a sigh. Behind Naruto, chairs scrapped back. And there are monsters in these waters. He didn't feel a thing as Marcus balked at him. No, wait, he told a lie. Pity, today was a rare exception. He was starting to enjoy those. It had taken him the better part of 3 seconds to decide if he was willing to pounce on his bait. But now that they had, you a finger jabbed Marcus in the nose. I don't like your tone. Take that back. Apologize, and we can drop this. The enforcer looked up at him. And if I don't? Naruto smiled. Smack. The hell does that? His fist flickered. A proper shinobi would have seen it coming, or at the very least, realized their peril. And Uchiha would have dodged away, a Hyuga deflected, and Uzumaki endured. Marcus was none of these things. He took the hit like any human would. In a word, poorly. In short, the uppercut slammed into Marcus' glass chin and sent him spinning away end over end, mask over S over elbows, shedding clothes as he went from sheer momentum alone. He struck a table, left in little more than a pair of boxers. Drink and food flew, spattering more than a few patrons. Silence descended over the bar as everyone, to a man, climbed to their feet. The man himself didn't rise again. He'd been knocked clean out. His guards bristled. 10 enforcers. Alone. Outnumbered. Surrounded by 30 angry patrons. Naruto crossed his fingers. 10 clones joined them. The outcome was never in question. In the background, Sevika wore a wolfish grin and whistled sharply. At least 15 more chairs drew back. One of enforcers swore. Oh, she. Everyone lunged at them. Oh, shit. 2 little words. That was all it took to ignite the powder keg that the last drop had become. Marcus lay stunned out on the deck, drooling into the floorboards. Chairs scraped back as everyone in the bar rose to their feet. Bereft of his leadership, his fellow enforcers hesitated when faced with that sea of angry faces. Just for a moment. A second, really. More than enough. Sevika whistled. Naruto crossed the fingers of his good hand using a single seal to summon a brace of shadow clones. Vander swore and reached up to grab his gauntlets dangling above the bar. Oh shit, indeed. As one, the lanes waited and with a roar, decades of rage unleashed in an instant. All hell broke loose. Fists flew. Bottles blurred through the air. Tables toppled and bodies hit the floor as the world swirled in merry madness. A melee broke forth, creating a twisted tangle of arms and legs even an Uchiha would have trouble making sense of. It was madness. It was chaos. It was glorious. Don't kill them, Naruto hollered over it all as he broke a man's arm. Kick their asses, but I want them alive. Damn it, no killing, you hear me. He didn't think anyone beyond his clones heard him, but he shouted it anyway. A burly enforcer caught sight of him in the fray and lunged, hands grasping. His good arm cracked out, divesting the man, or was it a woman, hard to tell with all that armor of their helm and more than a few teeth besides. Back they flew, spitting bits of helmet. Another grabbed him from behind, only to howl in pain as he drove his skull back into their face, obliterating their nose. Sevika caught that one by his arm and reeled them away into a bruising roundhouse that sent him spinning to the floor. He whirled away in time to see Vander clobber an enforcer making for the stairs. Poor bastard folded like paper. No one would be getting to the kids that way. The door to the pub crashed open and more enforcers rushed in, batons at the ready. Nobody move. Marcus had left some men outside after all. Smart of him. They hadn't brought their rifles. Unwise of them. Charge. Vaulting a table, Naruto dove at the nearest enforcer and speared him to the floor with a powerful kick, such that would have made Might Guy weep with joy. He heard bone crack under his feet, punctuated by a low groan as he dug his heel in. Probably the poor bastard's ribs. He didn't stop to feel pity, he couldn't afford to. Using their chest as a springboard, he launched himself headlong into the rest before they could get their bearings. 3 more guards went down in such a manner, ripped from their feet by broad swings of his arm and legs. Someone hollered and an unlucky enforcer took a pipe to the face before they could reach him. A tide of furious men and women followed his lead, all too eager to exact their well-earned vengeance on the arrogant enforcers before them. Wasn't even a proper fight after that. Everything dissolved into a brawl. Naruto lost himself to it. All the anger, all the frustration he'd been feeling, it flowed. He realized he was laughing. These weren't all good people, but they were fighting with him against these idiots. That alone heartened him. Time got funny after that. He wasn't sure how much passed. Minutes, hours, less, more. Enough. In hindsight, Naruto wasn't rightly sure who hollered it, only then someone did. It might have been Sevika or Vander or anyone else. Whoever did, it flipped a switch. Someone was slapping something heavy against a wall, creating an awful din above the chaos. Truth be told, it didn't matter. With the last enforcer down, the violence gradually began to ebb until it ceased completely. With tempers running high, it took the better part of 5 minutes to sort everything out. His gaze strayed to the sprawled bodies with a sigh. All things considered, the enforcers had fared poorly. Their side hadn't. Only a handful on their side had been knocked about, few with serious injuries. His clones were helping those, even as the rest dragged the last stragglers into the center, unconscious one and all. They'd be waking up with headaches and broken bones besides. One of Vander's boys prodded a dazed enforcer with his boot. Whaddya wanna do with him, boss? Naruto balked. Boss me? Yup. Should we kill them? Wanna they're beaten. He scowled at the man as much as the insinuation. We don't do that here. An angry rumble went up. The anger that followed threatened to choke his senses. Then we should one of these bastards beat my kid. Yeah, they started it, we should end it. It's only fair. Maybe they though it was. Piltover had been putting Zon down for a long time now. They'd gotten their first real taste of justice here today. Only made sense that they'd crave more. For the life of him, Naruto didn't know how to give it to them. He's right. Vander stepped forth, and he noted with some small satisfaction that the man's cast iron gauntlets were now far from clean. There's been enough violence for one day. There'll be consequences for this. Let's not make it any worse than it need be. They didn't like the sound of that. Sevika looked fit to storm up and have words with Vander. An ugly yet beautiful idea dawned. Naruto grabbed it and ran with it. I never said we were letting them go with their dignity intact. Heads turned toward him. Kurama chortled. Floor's yours. Don't screw up. Nothing ventured. Dead, they only send a single message. But alive, he spread his arms, channeling his best Kakashi impression. Just think about it. They'll spread word of what happened here just by breathing. That message will live in infamy. Marcus started this. Now he and his men would serve as example. Tar and feather them, tie them up, then dump them on the bridge. Laughter swelled with his words, and he didn't have to fake his grin. After all, we want the world to see the chickens they are. A chorus of eyes went up as they went to work as one. Hey! Naruto turned in time to see Sevika stalk his way. She stormed right up to him. He had an inkling of what she was about to do, but for once in his life, he just wasn't able to react in time. Maybe his was up. Perhaps he was curious. Maybe he just didn't want to. Then she was upon him. Him what? It wasn't a, not really. She smashed her lips against his and he felt their teeth click together before she jerked back again. He barely had time to experience it, then it was over. There, she grunted, wiping her mouth with one sleeve. For a job well done. Got that out of my system for now. Naruto blinked, 2 days to properly respond. Biwa, me and my boys will clean up this mess. The old dog's glaring at you. Her piece said, clapped him on the shoulder and walked away. He soon realized why. Even without turning around, he could feel Vander glaring at him. Why did that bother him so? Why much? What's that look for? He pivoted and planted his arm in one pocket, refusing to show the hurt he felt. I tried your way. Really? He had. For the longest time. Now we're doing it mine. It's a compromise. His hand swept back up to where the enforcers were even now being divested of their armor. They're alive, they get to go back to their families, and maybe, just maybe, they learn a lesson from all this. And what might that lesson be? He still hadn't taken the cast irons off. Naruto wondered if he ever would again. I thought it went without saying. Don't start something you can't finish. The old brawler sighed. You're taking it too far. Am I? A muscle jumped in his jaw. Way I see it, he dusted off his hands. I've taken it just far enough. Vander stepped forward. Naruto matched him. A ripple of anticipation ran through the room. These people deserve a better life than this. More than Piltover's leftovers, I think. Most of them probably turned to crime because they never had a chance to be anything more, anything better. The more he thought of it, the more he spoke, and the more he spoke, the more he warmed to the idea. So, yeah, I'm gonna give it to them. I'm going to make things better down here. You're talking about a revolution. Anger sparked into righteous rage, and he lost hold of himself. Wrong. Naruto jabbed a finger against Vander's chest. I'm talking about change. Change long overdue. The old man fell silent at that. At length, he sighed. I never wanted to don these gloves again. He glowered down at the grisly gauntlets. He still swore. Why cast irons? So hard to clean. Naruto knew what he meant. Hands once wide would always have on them. Don't doubt that. He set his stance, but didn't retreat. His emotions were too muddled to read. Try as he might, he couldn't get his bearings. Look, big guy, I'm not your enemy. Vander looked like he knew how to throw a punch, and he didn't relish being on the receiving end of those fists. Regeneration or not, that would hurt a lot. Help me with this. We can do so much good for these people. A yelp behind him claimed his attention. Oh, wow. Naruto craned his neck and found Powder peeking out of the stairwell with wide eyes. Vi and the boys. He flailed for a moment before recalling their names stood not a pace behind, all but balking at his grim handiwork. It sparked a curious pang of shame within him. He would have preferred they hadn't seen this. Kids were looking at him and Vander like they were heroes. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired. You guys did this. And how Sevika crowed from the back. Naruto sighed. We'll talk later. I need to catch a shower. I'll be along shortly. Wait, Vi bleated, bringing him up short. That's it, you're just gonna let these guys go. After a bit of ritual humiliation, yes. Vi. Vander's voice rose in low warning. Leave it. We'll talk about this lot later. Though she stomped a foot, startling Milo and Clagger. They came here for us. Because you lot hit a Piltover penthouse. To prove ourselves. Naruto rolled his eyes, tracking Powder as she and the boys wandered over to one of the enforcers. A little looting might help with Powder with her latest gadget. Any glee he might have felt was soured by Vi's expression when he pivoted back. Oh, Suyer. Now Vander realized how truly eager she was for a fight. He tried to warn him, he really had, but evidently it had fallen on deaf ears. Speaking of which, that doesn't change anything. He turned back and just in time to hear Vi snarl something in response to Vander. You both have all this power but you don't use it, you're weak. Hey, no. How wrong she was. He reached around and grabbed her by the shoulder. It takes more strength to restrain yourself than you could possibly know, Vi. All I know is that you're full of hot air. She scowled at him. You won't fight. Not when it matters. He was right about you. Naruto and Vander exchanged a baffled look. Who is he? Vi clammed up. The moment she did, Vander took her by the shoulders and steered her aside, leaving him with that ominous question. In the background, one of the wounded enforcers began to rise. Powder whirled on the spot and kicked him in the chin. He dropped like a sack of potatoes, doubly so when she planted a foot on his back. Someone whistled. Damn, Whiskers. What the hell have you been feeding that kid? Was that a glimmer of pride he pried just now? It felt like it. Just a daily diet of kick-ass. He ignored Vi's smoldering glare from across the room, because now Powder was preening up at him now. See, I knocked him out with one kick. Are you proud of me? Knocking out a dazed man wasn't much an accomplishment, but he knew when she was fishing for prize. Naruto bit back a retort and patted her head instead. Good girl. Suo, she leaned into his palm with a pleased hum. You ever gonna teach me to fight like that? A rueful chuckle escaped him. Was this what it felt like to be a parent? It was strangely wholesome. Sure, I'll just teach you to fight like a one-armed cripple, shall I? They both knew he was anything but, still, she played along. Yeah, but you're the badass, old man. Powder squirmed forward and latched onto his leg, looking up at him with bright eyes. You've got moves for days. Old, am I? Well, maybe I'm too old to teach you anything. Have that, you cheeky little shit. And why would I want to teach these moves to a snot-nosed kid with more snark than sense? Because, she smacked her lips, giving as good as she got. I'm your darling pupil. Somebody has to remember these things before you go senile. Darling, he scoffed. Maybe in 10 years. Trying growing up a little before you act like a pupil. Powder whined. Naruto. He snorted, breaking the tableau, and she giggled. Sevika swept back in, shattering the moment. Mind if I steal him for a second? Powder pouted. Sure, fine. Make it quick. She didn't budge. The brawler sighed. Alone, squirt. Powder took the hint, and didn't look much pleased with it. She stalked off with a huff. Once we've cleaned up this lot, Sevika's lips brushed his ear. There's someone I want you to meet. After hearing that little speech of yours, he might be willing to help you. Sense reasserted itself. Right. Naruto coughed. I'll do that. Later. Who is this person Sevika wanted him to meet? Why are we here? Sevika didn't answer, not at first, guiding him through another alley. Naruto blew out a sigh and forced himself to follow even as his instincts bridled. This deep into the lanes, few buildings were left standing. Those that remained stood bathed in heavy smog from the mines. She'd offered him a rebreather, but he'd waved her off. He made me an offer. She rolled her shoulders in an awkward shrug. Wasn't interested at the time, so I told him I'd think about it. But he gave me a place to meet just this once. She pushed a door open. It parted on rusty hinges with a torture squeal, heralding its lack of use. In an instant he understood where she'd led him and followed her into a sprawling open space. Footsteps echoed hollowly in the abandoned refinery. Pitted steel and twisted frames alone told a sad story of what had happened here. Wasn't all that barred for a neutral location, given who they were about to meet. Naruto saw him then. A man sat in a high-backed chair behind a wooden table. A bottle of wine and 2 glasses rested therein, but he paid them little mind. Flanked by 2 guards, he was the very picture of poise. He found himself staring at a pale, thin man of middling age clad in a red and black Piltovan 3-piece suit. His dark hair was combed through with streaks of gray. His right eye was a startling shade of blue, contrasting heavily with the scarring etched into the left side of his face, and that eye. That blasted eye something was wrong with it, heavily discolored with an orange iris set against black sclere, like it was infected. He fought down a shiver at the sight. The man looked up at their entry, good eye fixing on them. Sevika. And then he noticed him. You've brought a friend. In a sense. Naruto hedged, reluctantly taking the seat opposite him. Silco. The brawler grunted, taking up a flanking position. Hope you don't mind my +1. Come now, the older man tutted at her tone. I'm hardly going to kill someone for seeing my face this time. And you, boy. His good eyes swept to Naruto. I've heard of you. How did he respond to that? Names aside, he didn't even know who this was. Wish I could say the same. Sevika swore softly behind him. Thankfully the man seemed to take it in stride. May I be frank? Naruto released a breath. Please, it'll be easier. I'd like to dispense with the pleasantries, if it's all the same to you. We both know why we're here. Really, because he didn't. We could be allies, or we could be enemies. The choice is yours. Enemies? He warmed to the words. Everybody wants to be my enemy, especially these days. Laughter spilled out of him as he leaned back. Never really understood why. You know I can be such a good friend, but anyone who's anyone just lives to pick a fight with me. Friend. Silco scoffed at that. It was a hoarse, raspy sound. I had a friend, once. A man I considered brother and all, but he touched a hand to his ruined face and the tainted eye locked within. He gave me this. Naruto winced. Sasuke had taken his arm, just as someone had taken Silco's eye. A stubborn spark of pity flared to life in him. I don't betray my friends. That may well be, the mogul allowed, but you'll find my trust is not so easily earned. The ghost of a smile touched his lips. Yet I can earn it. You just implied as much. Perhaps. As he looked on, Silco fished a wooden case from his coat and set it down on the table. Nimble fingers flicked it open, revealing a pair of cigars and a lighter within. Much to Naruto's chagrin, he offered him one. He thought about reaching for it, then thought better of the cigar. Never has seen that. Sorry, he held up a hand. Not really my thing. As you wish. The criminal shrugged. Blast it, that I really was unnerving him. I could heal that, you know. Silco considered him intently. You really could. I've heard stories about you. But what price would you demand in return? Nothing. He held out his hand. I'm not one to leave others in pain if I can help it. Every man has his vice. Silco exhaled languidly instead, expelling a ring of smoke into the dead air overhead. And his price? Naruto stilled. If you're offering to buy me out, you can forget it. Ain't got a price. Don't you? His good eye narrowed. You're rather fond of that girl. What was her name? Powder, or shall I call her Jinx? A faint smile creased his scarred face. The Lanes seemed fond of that nickname. A low growl tore through the room, pervading neutral ground. Sefkia drew back to regard him with wide eyes. Even then it took him a moment to realize it had come from him. He wrestled his temper back under control before Silco could capitalize on his brief lapse. Careful, you're making me angry. He let a touch of Kurama's chakra bleed into his eyes, staining them a vivid red, just like the old days. You wouldn't like me when I'm angry. I expect not. Silco polished off the last of his cigar and cast it to the ground. His shoe stomped down on it immediately, grinding it to dust. But the fact remains, you style yourself as invincible, untouchable, immovable, like the very mountains themselves. You aren't. No one is. This mustn't register on an emotional level. Yet it did. All of them. You know, he drawled, some people think they can outsmart me. Tittering a little, he crossed one leg over the other. I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I'll be the first to admit it. Pausing now, he gave the words a moment to sink in, to let the satisfaction seep into Silco's soul. And they've gotten the drop on me a time or two, sure. A self-same smile and shrug. It's happened. And then, but I've yet to meet anyone who could outsmart my fists. Sevika snorted behind him, and that was it. The floodgates burst open and he laughed, unable to stop. You want to kidnap my apprentice? Use her as leverage against me? Go ahead. Leaning forward, he bared his teeth. Try. See what happens. Powder isn't weak. She'll bend your boys into a pretzel. Silco met his gaze evenly. If he sought weakness there, he would be disappointed. At length he poured himself a glass of wine and took a languid sip. Ice cubes clinked in the crystalline glass as he set it down. I'd like to let in you in a very important secret I learned when I was about your age, boy. He planted one palm against the table, levering himself upright. You see, power, real power, doesn't come to those who are born strongest, or fastest, or smartest. No, it comes to those who will do anything to achieve it. On that, I'm afraid we'll have to disagree. Naruto felt his lips thin into an angry line. I don't want power. Never have. Never will. I just want to keep my promise. You have Vander's spirit. A nod was his reward. And you're not afraid to fight. I'll give you that. But this only ends one way. You're right, he smiled. It ends with you listening to me. I can be very persuasive. Silence stretched between the two powers at play, neither yielding. Have something to say? Do you? Go on. Enlighten me. Time to make his move. Look, Silco, I worked hard to get where I am, sure, but I only made it this far because I had help. When the older man didn't challenge him, he knew he'd found his opening. Because people believed in me. From what you've told me so far, it sounds like you'd sacrifice everything that you are for your dream, throw yourself on the pyre of your own ambition to see it actualized. You might realize your goal, sure. He rolled his shoulders in a shrug, but is it even your dream anymore if you can't recognize it, or your people are left cowering in fear of the very man who saved them? That's not a good dream at all. It's a nightmare. Sevika hummed behind him. Told you. He knows how to talk. But can he back those words up with action? Silco fished a knife from his pocket and laid it on the table. You're not afraid to fight, I can respect that, but you're not going far enough. He pushed it toward him, hilt first. The only way to defeat a superior enemy is to stop at nothing, to become the thing they fear. Funny, Naruto picked it up and twirled it in his fingers, letting the jagged knife dance along his knuckles. Someone just told me the opposite. Vander. Something dark and ugly flashed across Silco's face. He would, the old fool, ever the pacifist. It quelled a moment later. Frankly, I'm amazed you got him to dirty his hands. How did you do it? He shrugged. I appealed to his better nature. Silco scoffed. Silence stretched between them once more. Very well. I have no intention to stand in your way, so long as your goals don't interfere with mine. Aha, now they came to the meat of the matter. And what is it you want? Freedom for the Lanes. A rare knot of passion overtook his calm facade. The nation of Zon, the whole of the underground united as one, independent of Piltover. Naruto let the words stew, considering the criminal before him. Silco was a bad person, but he wasn't a bad guy. His emotions, though veiled to anyone else, were an open book for him to read. In his heart of hearts, beneath all the anger and betrayal and deceit, he genuinely wanted the best for his people. He wanted them to rise to the surface. And why shouldn't he? What choice did the people of Zon have down here, but to become criminals? You couldn't earn a fair day's wage down here. Kids could barely live down here. Damn it, some people were eating each other. How did he fix that? And yet if this man was given the gift of chakra, he would use it for ill. So how do I solve this problem? He couldn't be Naruto the dolt here, not Naruto the dense, nor Naruto the dumb. Throwing Silco in a cage might make him feel better in the short run, but it wouldn't change anything. Taking him down or sage forbid it, killing him would only exacerbate the situation. And then where would they be? Right back where they started. The problem lay with Piltover, but also Zahn. His mind flailed anew, thinking of all the negotiations he'd seen throughout his life, all the great schemers he could only ever hope to emulate at best. How would Kakashi handle this Shikamaru Juriyetsune Itachi? He racked his brain to the brink, trying to come up with something. Don't do anything, Sasuke would. Bad idea. Worst idea, that. Wait. A slow, satisfied smile spread across his face. He blew out a long breath and schooled his face into an impassive mask. There's nothing wrong with freedom. He spoke slowly, choosing each word with infinite care. Or wanting a better life for your people. Those are the marks of a good leader. Silco watched him like a hawk, waiting for the other shoe to drop. But you're going about it the wrong way. There's an angle you've not considered. Is that so? His tone gave nothing away, his expression inscrutable. And you think you've got it all figured out, do you? I do. It wasn't a lie. He'd just realized something Silco hadn't, and he wasn't keen to share. Not yet. The criminal's gaze traveled to the severed stump of his right arm. How did you lose that? Naruto didn't answer, not right away. Respond too readily and Silco would think him eager to please, take too long and the man might think him afraid. Powder and Vander were the only ones who knew the truth of his arm, that it wasn't a disability at all. Kurama's chakra made for a handy prosthetic. Let Silco think him weak, crippled. It would make his shock all the more satisfying. Fighting a friend. He touched a hand to the bunched-up sleeve. He was like a brother to me. Something strange sparked in Silco's soul, then. It felt like kinship. Betrayal, then. He touched a hand to his ruined eye. In a sense, I can understand that. Another touch to his eye. It's always those we trust most that turn on us in the end. He chuckled bitterly. You see what Vander did to me? Shock ripped the rug right out from under Naruto. Apparently he hadn't kept his face blank either, because the madman smiled. Oh, didn't he tell you Vander isn't the man you think he is? He sensed an old story there, one he didn't care to hear. He plays the part of the pacifist, but he's every bit the monster I am. Worse, even. You'll see, in time. The knife stabbed down with a thunk, burying itself into the table. Silco quirked a brow. That may be. Naruto tore his hand away, but I still trust him. Then you're a fool. There it was, a spark of anger burned in that cold heart. Just as he is. Maybe so. He pushed himself upright and stood. I'll help Zahn, but I'll do it my way. I won't sacrifice my soul to save this city. Bait the hook. Gain his interest. Make him ask you back later. This wasn't something he could solve in a single meeting. As much as he might wish otherwise, he needed time to work on Silco. You couldn't force someone to change, they had to want it. He wasn't sure if Silco did. It was still too early to tell. He could only play the cards he'd been dealt. Right now he didn't have a winning hand. He would, in time. But not yet. Naruto made his choice. He stood, drawing his chair back. We're leaving, Sevika. Even after all that, she still followed him. Silco's raspy chuckle echoed at his back. Made your choice, have you? She lifted her chin in mulish defiance. I have. Naruto kept walking. Wait. He paused. I wish you good fortune in the war. To commend a warning. Silco's voice rasped at his back. You don't want to be my enemy. Tread carefully. Funny, a scarlet eye gleamed over his shoulder. I was just about to say the same thing. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I'll see you around, Silco. Perhaps you will. The masterminds parted. It would not be their last meeting. No, the war for Zahn had only just begun. Vi cornered her a week later. In hindsight, Powder knew she'd been had the moment she stumbled into her room after a long day's training and found her sister sitting on her cot. Alone, Milo and Clagger were nowhere to be seen. Why did that relieve her so? Perhaps it was the best. She'd grown distant from her brothers of late. She'd been so focused on her training that she'd barely spared them a second thought. But not Vi. Never Vi. She'd never forget her one and only sister. A sister who didn't look much pleased right now. Surely it was nothing. It was late, right? Hey, sis, she grimaced. Can I have my bed back? I'm kinda sleepy. In a minute. Vi patted the space beside her. We need to talk. Think you can manage that? Nope. Do we? Powder fought down a nervous giggle and didn't budge, not a bit. There's nothing to talk about. Vi gave her that look, the same one that had always quelled her ever since she was little. The infamous I'm not angry, just disappointed look that her sibling had mastered so well. Powder tried to stand up to it. To her, she really did. But it was just so hard. A little whine escaped her lips. Being the little sister was hard. She kicked at the floor with one foot and looked down, feeling terribly small. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ignore you. I've been busy, you know. I know. Here at last, Vi's expression softened a fraction of an inch. You've been off training ever since those enforcers came by. And here she'd thought herself subtle. Powder scratched at her cheek and looked away. Sorry about that. Don't be. Vi made way for her when she sat beside her. I talked to the old man while you were out. Naruto. Powder perked up again, despite herself. Does he need me? Where is he? I can. Whoa, hey, her sibling held up a hand. The old fart didn't ask after you. Relax. Indignation flared in her heart. Old fart. He's not old. She puffed out her cheeks in anger. He's amazing, and you don't know anything about him. Vi weathered her remark with a patience only an older sibling could possess. And you do. Powder firmed her upper lip and stood her ground. More than you. In that case, and now they came to the meat of the matter, would you be willing to teach me what he taught you? I could help you. We could get strong together. Why ask me? A blink, you're my sister. As if that explained everything. I know you already asked him. Is that why you're asking me? Her face closed down in an instant. A pit of dread opened in Powder's stomach and swallowed everything she'd ever known. The bedroom felt small all of a sudden. Cramped. The walls closed in. What had brought this on then came the panic, dark and cloying, awful and choking. No. This was not happening. This could not be happening. Naruto had promised. He'd told the truth, kept his word, so why was Vi asking her why now? Vi, no. She sputtered out. I can't. Can't. Her sister rose, not towering over her, but close enough. Or won't. It's not that simple. The words burst out of her in a reedy whine. This isn't something I can give to you. Can't you? She didn't back down, not for a moment. You're in over your head here, Powder. I'm trying to help you here, pull you back from the edge. She didn't need to be pulled back from the edge. There was no edge, none at all. If there was one, she was driving her to it. Something snapped in her. Why do you always do this? Can't I just have this one thing? Here at last, her sister flinched. Tough cookies, too little, too late. Powder, though you have everything, you're strong and fast and smart, and before this I was nothing less than nothing, and now all of a sudden you want the same thing. Why? The dam broke, and her voice went with it. So you can be better at this, too. That's not at all. Vi laid a hand on her shoulder. Her pity burned in the worst way. He's using you, and I just want to protect you. Liar. Powder shoved her away and sprang to her feet, desperate for distance. Shut up. I do. Too much. She couldn't take it anymore. She didn't understand. Why didn't any of them understand? Get out. Violet balked. Excuse me. I said get out. She shoved with all her might. Out. Vi rocketed backward with a startled yelp. An awful crack filled her ears. You sure this'll work? Vander looked up, squinting in the low light. Here's hoping. Naruto looked up from the contraption he'd been building, its form shadowed in the gloom. Not really. A glowing golden hand slapped down the hatch with an audible clank. This'll give Piltover a scare if nothing else. Something to chew on while we get ready. In a flash he zipped across the scaffolding, down a ladder, and landed beside him. There could be no denying the merry light in his eyes. Not unhinged, but dangerous all the same. The blonde had been manic after his meeting with Silco. Mad, even. But to make this, Vander grimaced. Shock. Right. Don't be like that. A hand clapped his shoulder to reassure him. This'll be the prank to end all pranks, and hey, if it works, we'll have peace with Piltover, all without a drop of. Isn't what you wanted? A noble idea. But noble ideas often failed. Assuming Silco doesn't interfere. He'd best not if he knows what's good for him. Just thinking of him made Vander shudder. To think that old devil was still up to his old tricks. It wasn't a surprise, merely another string of disappointments in a long line of such. And he was to blame for it. Should have killed him that day. He could have, if he hadn't lost his nerve. Maybe if he'd done the deed, they wouldn't be in the situation they were now. But the past was the past, as they say, until quite suddenly it's the present. Then the future. Even after this time, his old friend was determined to fulfill his dream, come fire and brimstone, if need be. Look, he began slowly, choosing his words with care. I appreciate what you're doing, but this. A harsh bang had both men looking up. What was that? Vi. Her sister didn't stir, didn't move, didn't rise, didn't so much as twitch where she lay, sprawled against the wall. She was too quiet, too still. Panic pulsed in Powder's heart. Her legs were heavy as she crept out into the hall after her. Slowly at first, faltering steps, then emboldened by panic. Frantic, fumbling hands patted her down, cradling her arms, and then, when no response came, her head. You're fine, you gotta be fine, come on, wake up. Her palms came away red. Her world stopped. She hadn't seen it at first, so closely did it blend with her sister's pink hair. But she did now. Panic became fear as she shrieked. Fear warped into dismay. Dismay to her. Vish was breathing, wasn't she? Had to be. Must be. If she wasn't. What's going on here? Powder pivoted too late. A hand came down on her shoulder, rooting her where she knelt. In her fear, she hadn't sensed Naruto's approach. He was upon her now like a storm, blue eyes wide. He took everything in at a glance, saw Vi's sprawled form, the dent in the wall, the on the floor. Powder, what did you do? Horror bleated in the little girl's mind as she recalled his warning. She'd hurt someone. Not just someone, but Vi. Her own sister. He would take it away. Her chakra, all of it. He'd take it all away. She'd broken the rule, his one rule, done the one thing he'd told her not to do. He'd punish her for it, wouldn't he? Clicking his tongue softly, Naruto knelt beside her. As she looked on, his palms shimmered a soft shade of gold, gold that he laid upon Vi. A faint groan fled from the girl's lips. It only made Powder feel all the worse. For a moment there, she'd thought she had Keikino. She couldn't form the word, not even in her mind. It was an accident, she hiccuped. I didn't mean to, I'm sure. His eyes didn't leave Vi, not for an instant. A bead of sweat ran down his skull. Cracked her skull pretty bad, though. Not sure if I can fix this in one sitting. She wasn't sure how long he knelt there. Minutes, hours, it could have been either. Eventually he pulled away. Dread reared its ugly head. Now, he'd do it now. Any second now, and he'd rip her chakra away, punish her for her foolishness, for her slip. She'd go back to being nothing. No one, just a useless girl with her useless bombs. Her voice warbled under his gaze. I'm sorry. It's all right. Warm arms enfolded her, holding her close. She just hit her head. Powder glared up at him. No, she didn't. I hurt Vi. His arms tightened around her just so. She hit her head. Realization dawned, and it was both ugly and beautiful all at once. He'd keep this a secret from Vander, for her powder nodded tentatively, but her fears weren't so easily quashed. They writhed and wriggled in her heart even now, a great serpent devouring her every thought, a frenzied flame scouring all before it. Why did he treat her like this? Why did he baby her, favor her? She wanted to believe that she knew the reason, but to even think of it, especially now, threatened to reduce her to a gibbering wreck. Am I? She swallowed once to master herself and failed. Am I really that important to you? Of course you are. He gave her a quizzical look. You're my apprentice. Huh, right, just his apprentice. Nothing more, nothing less. Of course. Her eyes watered, tears stinging her vision. Stuffy old man. He favored her with a wry smile. Uppity brat. Powder latched on. Only then did she cry. Shesh really did love him. It terrified her. After that incident, Powder didn't stray far from his side. Naruto wasn't much sure how to feel about that. On the one hand, he found her far more receptive to his teaching now, more willing to listen than ever. This accident had opened her eyes. Now that her sister had come to harm, Powder realized just how powerful she was, and with it, the meaning of restraint. On the other, worried for her mental state. Powder seemed strong on the outside, but on the inside she'd become brittle. Fragile was that the word. He didn't much mind the attention, but if things continue to pace like this, something was going to break. He'd made an excuse just to get some air, sending her off to get a few scraps for his next project. She was all too happy to do so. It gave him time to think, to ponder his next move. Even if he didn't know what said move us. There you are. Naruto looked up from his workbench, hands still fiddling with his of scrap. How on earth did Powder make gizmos and gadgets out of these? No, never mind. Focus. Vander had asked him something. I'm sorry, what? Vi's old man looked at him askance. You seen Clagger and Milo about? The blonde quirked an eyebrow. No, why? Haven't seen him. Oh, sorry. Truth be told, he'd not given much thought to the boy as of late. Sure, they were Powder's brothers, and as such he'd tried to be nice to them in the beginning. He'd failed. They'd gone out of their way to avoid him. Now he hadn't seen them since Vi had her fall. He hadn't missed their black looks. Maybe they knew the truth. Maybe they didn't. Regardless, there was bad between them now. He couldn't just mop up. Fair enough. Let me know if they poke their heads out. Yeah, Vander clasped his shoulder. Need a word with them. Right. He muttered half-heartedly. Will do. He could tell Vander wanted to say more. He had that air about him today. Old dog was probably worried about. Thankfully, he took the hint. His piece said. The aging brawler sauntered away, grasped the door to his workshop, and closed it behind, leaving Naruto to his work. You're treading a slippery slope there, kid. How much are you willing to let slide? His lips pursed. It was an accident. Was it, Kurama? Fine. At least answer me this. What will you do if she becomes too powerful? Naruto quirked a blonde brow inward. Stronger than us? How, exactly? Fair, the old fox allowed. Perhaps I'm being paranoid. You are, but it's fine. He muttered. I forgive you. So benevolent. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the scraping sounds of his tools. At length, Naruto felt the need to speak again. I won't let her become another Sasuke. I swear. The stump of his right arm twitched in solemn reminder. Just a bit of phantom pain. He conjured a golden chakra in its place, curled it into a fist, and went back to work. If he could just make one of these smoke bombs work, then he'd finally be able to take the next step in his plan. He needed a lot of smoke, with no fire, a distraction with no destruction. Do you regret it? A little, he admitted, fiddling with a screw. Still don't think I killed him. You best pray you did. I don't relish the idea of facing an Uchiha. He's gone, Naruto. Kurama's voice was almost soft this time. It wasn't your fault. You did what you had to do. He grunted half-heartedly. Whatever you say. He was still working when Powder returned. Vi wouldn't look at her. Neither would Milo, or Clagger, even. Thathert, more than Powder cared to admit. It stung like nothing else, wounded her in the worst of ways. She wasn't even sure Vi properly remembered what happened, but enough of the Miori lingered to make her miserable all the same. Their bond was fractured, if not broken outright. For the life of her, she didn't know how to repair it. She had to try. She just didn't know how, right now. And yet despite her sister's actions, or perhaps in spite of it, Naruto had covered for her. She'd broken his one rule. He'd been well within his rights to take her chakra away, to leave her the powerless wretch she'd been before. But he hadn't now, had he. Instead he'd helped her cover it up. She felt just awful about Vi, she really did. She'd learned her lesson. With great power came great responsibility. She had to be careful now. She must be careful, not to break this world or those who lived in it. It was with such thoughts in mind that she came for today's lesson. Tiny knuckles rapped against the door. Come in. She stumbled in, prize in hand. Here, I got a lot of scrap. You gonna tell me what it's for? You'll see. He helped her carry her bag to the table, then beckoned to the seat beside him. Here, have a look at this. Only then did she notice the scroll laid out nearby. Naruto looked to it, then to her with a pleased smile. Today we'll be practicing summoning. Her lips pursed in a thin line. Not sage training. It's not that simple. He chided. I've taught you a bit, but the toads are better at this sort of thing than me. Oh, there's nothing wrong with being eager, Powder. He patted her head. But you gotta be patient. We live in a world of cardboard, you and I. She gazed up at him as he tousled her hair. We have to be careful not to lose control, or someone might get hurt, or worse, die. The word stung. She hung her head with a little whine. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. He chided. Be better. Be the person you know you can be. Now, come on. Up you go. She nodded and clambered into the seat beside him. That settled it. She'd made up her mind. She was going to marry him someday. Not now, of course, when she was older maybe. Just the thought of it brought a shy little smile to her face. She was his one and only pupil after all. She'd learn all she could from him, carry his teachings into the future. And then, well, time would tell. Let that old biddy Sevika have him for now. She could try to woo him all she liked. She wouldn't be top dog forever, nor would she be around forever. She'd show Sevika. She'd show her. She'd show them all. Naruto would never see her coming. Are the men ready? His lackey grunted. Jet about, boss. Silco stifled a sigh into his glass. Give them a nudge. But, boss, I thought we was gonna wait until, well, you know. Your thoughts are irrelevant. He pinioned him with an ugly look. Get out. The man saluted stiffly and stalked out. No spine in this one, either. So hard to find good help these days. Left alone with his own thoughts, he turned in his chair to admire the underwater world beyond the glass and the beasts beneath. Monstrosities, every last one of them. Even a single creature could drag galleons down to the depths. Beasts, the lot of them. They didn't care for subtlety, only power. They took what they wanted, when they wanted. He almost envied them in their simplicity. Pivoting, he turned to regard his erstwhile ally lurking in the shadows. Beautiful, aren't they? They're monsters. He hummed and poured himself a glass of wine, then took a moment to watch the dark red liquid swirl within. Red as, there's a monster inside all of us. You of all people know this. Silence reigned supreme. He began to wonder if his guest had departed. And then, Naruto's shadow clone sighed. Does it really have to be this way? You know the answer as well as I. With a flick of the wrist, Silco knocked the glass back and drank deeply. He savored the burn in his throat. It centered him. He'd agreed to stay out of the boy's way, and he had kept that promise. Their pact held for now. They'd done well to avoid one another thus far, not stepping on each other's toes. Whatever plans that blonde braggart held were his own, just as Silco's schemes belonged to him and him alone. They would leave one another be for the time being, until such was no longer possible. He had made no such oath to Piltover. It was nothing personal, really. Just good business. No, wait. He told a lie. It was very personal. He took no small pleasure in what he was about to do, in the chaos he was about to wreak. Enough of Piltover and its posh pageantry. They had sowed the wind, and now they would reap the whirlwind. Contrary to what some might think, he didn't need to win a war against Piltover. He just needed to scare them. Shimmer would do all that and more. Levering himself upright, he snatched the knife off his desk and stalked out the door. May the best man win. Powder was a quick study. Naruto wasn't sure why that made him proud, but it did all the same. So damn proud. In the weeks that followed, his students soaked up everything he taught like a living sponge. Training weight, summoning shadow clone, sage mode, she threw herself into each with singular determination. Did she struggle? Yes. Did she falter? Definitely. Did she overcome? Most certainly. Every task he set her, she took to with minimal complaint, but maximum questions. He soon discovered it wasn't enough to see a jutsu for her. She had to understand it, dissect it, take it apart. She didn't just want to learn from, she went above and beyond. For perhaps that reason alone, he continued to teach her. Her willingness to work won his respect, her refusal to give up, admiration. It didn't matter what he taught her. She kept at it. Power didn't simply want to learn, she needed to, and that need drove her hard, harder than he ever could. It almost made her damn sneaky when she wanted to be. She was good, and getting better every day, but she still had a ways to go before she'd catch up to him. As such, Naruto didn't deign to look up when her shadow fell over his. He kept walking, even as his sixth sense squawked at him. His little minion had chosen her point of ambush well this particular morning, leaping from misty rooftop just as he entered, striking with the sun on her back. A sound stratagem. Alas, there were a few flaws to said stratagem. First, he'd sensed her coming. Second, he had heard her. And last but not least, Rasengan. He didn't bother to counter her. His head swayed to the right and let the swirling sphere whistle harmlessly past, then her body with it, arms still fully extended from the lunge. He saw her eyes widen, first in surprise, then pain as he slapped an open palm into her elbow. The limb creaked but held even as her jutsu guttered. Impressive, most impressive. But she wasn't a shinobi yet. A knee smashed into her small body, launching her into a brick wall, wedging her there. He knew she could take it. A hand slammed down just beside her head, drawing a yelp from his student. The other rose, and gently chopped her on the forehead. How many times do I have to tell you, he tutted softly as she pouted up at him. Don't shout when you're about to attack. It ruins the element of surprise. She squirmed, still stuck in the wall. But it sounds cool. His right eye began to twitch. Cool, she says. Come on now, powder. Hirama rumbled a laugh. You weren't so different once yourself. Maybe so. The one-armed shinobi heaved a sigh. A golden claw burst the stump, tore her free from the wall, set her down on both feet. You want cool? He wagged a finger at her. Your body will be cold and dead if an opponent catches you pulling a stunt like that. Powder flinched, looked down, and scuffed a shoe against the street. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. He patted her forehead. Be better. I know you can. Heat speared through her cheeks. Can we keep trying? Naruto didn't answer. Instead, he waited while she got her breathing under control, dragged herself upright, and thumbed a line from her lip. Her eyes gleamed, not with anger, but determination. A need to prove herself, but also something more. She made no move to attack, almost as if she were waiting for something. He realized what she wanted soon thereafter. You're getting better. Good job, Powder. I'm proud of you. Her face lit up and she made a pleased noise as she bounced in place. I can go another round. She really could, couldn't she? Such a stubborn girl, this wily little apprentice of his. All right. Naruto crooked a hand forward. Remember, hesitation is defeat. Powder grinned. Good to know. She was still speaking when the street ruptured beneath his feet. A blonde brow quirked, looking down now as twin hands burst forth and grabbed him by the ankles. Yanked. He didn't budge. They tugged again and still he remained immovable. A foot rose and stomped down, dispelling the shadow clone she'd tried to use against him. Nice try. He clapped his hands, congratulating her. But I'm using a jutsu to increase the gravity of my body. You'll have to try a bit harder. Razor wind lashed at his back. He dropped flat a second too late and lost a few strands of hair for it. Surprise gave way to confusion, then bloomed into baffled surprise. How did you learn that jutsu? He frowned her way. I only told you about it once. Powder grinned impishly, wholly at her ease. Practice. That settled it. Girl was a wise savant. Still, you're wide open. His fist slammed into her no, a plume of smoke. Another shadow clone. Heh, she'd learned her lesson after their last session. He ducked a sweeping kick from behind, caught her ankle, and levered her into a wall. She hit it in a handstand, inhaled mightily, and spat fire in his face. He laughed, warding it away with his good arm. Good, keep your body reinforced with chakra at all times. Easy for you to say. She kicked off the wall, stumbled a little, then finally found her balance. I can barely move with these stupid weights. Good. Good, Powder howled. Just think how fast you'll be when they finally come off. She flipped him off. He laughed and tousled her hair, earning a fearsome scowl. When will I unlock my line? You're assuming you have one. Really, it was a toss-up. Sometimes lines manifested randomly. Others were hereditary. He wouldn't be surprised if hers was related to explosions of some sort. Sure, great. Because that was exactly what Zahn needed. A wild little girl with a case of the zoomies running around blowing things up willingly. I know I do honestly. Her pout was adorable, so much so that it drew him out of his maudlin thoughts. Just you wait. I'll get even stronger once I find it. Strong enough to protect you and Vanderin. Vi. Naruto finished with a knowing smile. Her jaw clicked shut. I didn't say that. But you were thinking it. Don't read into it, old man. She looked away with a huff, arms crossed before her. Adorable. Must protect. I'm doing all the reading. She's your sister. Powder refused to turn his way. Sisters don't hurt each other. I'm sure you didn't mean to, back then. She's just jittery around you. Make up with her. She bit her lip. Finally, the dam broke. That's not the only thing. It isn't. She scowled at him when he quirked a blonde brow. She wants chakra. She wants to be better than me. It's not fair. Is that so? He knew she was grasping at straws. It didn't stop him. Well, too bad. I'm not giving it to her. People are won not by words, but action. She hasn't proven herself to me. And in truth, he wasn't sure Vi would be able to, not with an attitude like that. It'll take a lot to convince me. You mean it. Cross my heart and hope to die. Stick a needle in your eye. She finished with a giggle. Hope flashed in her eyes. You'll keep training me, then. Naruto hid a smile behind one hand and gently cuffed her head with the other. For now, Brett. Her smile was too pure. Then, a faint tremor ran through the streets, cutting her short. It was soon followed by an odd, muffled noise, then a curious ringing. Shouts echoed in the distance. Yet another muffled noise went up, and this one, Naruto knew well. It was the sound of an explosion. He craned his neck back, searching for the source. Saw the smoke, knew the direction it came from. Realization dawned, and it was an ugly thing indeed. His heart sank into his stomach. No, someone had hit the last drop. They found Vander's body first. He wasn't far from the smoldering wreckage. They soon saw why. The blackened burns on his back told a story all their own. He lay sprawled over Clagger and Milo's stunned forms. Must have shielded them from the worst of it. Against all odds, both boys were still breathing. Out cold, but alive. Naruto wasn't sure if he could say the same for the big oaf. Powder shrieked. No, he can't be. He's alive. Naruto touched a hand to his neck, sighed in relief when he found his pulse. Hurt, but alive. Where's Vi? He craned his neck back. Don't sense here anywhere nearby. Who did this? She rounded on the crumbling ruin that had once been their home, fists set at her sides. I'll tear them apart. Powder, I will. She rounded on him with wild eyes. There were good people in there. Someone just blew them the hell up. Why aren't you angry? He stared her into submission until finally, she looked away with a scowl. I am angry. Furious. Really, but anger won't change the fact that we don't know who did this. Something shifted through the hazy smoke. Ruble shifted. Naruto sensed them a moment later. Heard the gunshots. And the screams that followed. No. His temper blazed. They should know better. The enforcers most certainly didn't. The moment they laid eyes on them, they raised their weapons. There they are, one of them, a big brute towering head and shoulders. Above the rest, raised his rifle. Blast them. A gun barked. Powder wasn't quite quick enough and took a slug to the shoulder. She yelped and skittered behind him. Naruto's world didn't do red. That implied some measure of control. Of reason. Absently, he laid a hand on her wound and healed it. Muttered softly, stay with Vander. Then he stepped in and swung. The first gunman died as he stove their head in. Another pitched back as a racing in drilled through his torso. Then he was among them, and there was no time for anything but rage. Hesitation is defeat. He'd said those words earlier. Now he lived them and he didn't hesitate. You think a roaring roundhouse hurtled an enforcer away. You can hurt my apprentice. Another waited and he rounded on them in turn. Are you feeling angry, humiliated? Is that it? He caught their fist, snatched them up by the ground and slammed them down into their fellows. Idiot, you don't know what humiliation is. Bone twisted then broke as he stomped down in a rage. I'm trying to help this place, but you're all making this Sodom difficult. More unloaded on him. For what little good it did. He raised his gaze in the smoke. Blue eyes burned baleful red. Why won't you die? Someone gibbered and tried to reload. Naruto never knew who. Didn't care, frankly. A racing shuriken sparked in his palm. He threw it that way. The whimpers stopped. Honestly, has this ever worked? He sighed softly, wounds healing, the damage undone before their very eyes. Your kind never learn. Or was it Marcus that put you up to this? Even in his cold rage, he could still think. Reason. Prisoner. He needed a prisoner. His arms caught an unlucky enforcer in a bruising bear hug, broke his spine, threw him aside to question later. But that's all right. THRUCK. Class is now in session. And I'm the teacher. Another victim folded over as a fist slammed through their torso. They hurtled up into the air, only to cry out as a hand caught their ankle, yanked them down, and whipped them into the ground. The street creaked and began to crumble, leaving a decidedly human-shaped impression behind. Open your textbook to Chapter 9. Naruto's boot stomped down on there, grinding them deeper into the dirt as he leered down at them. Also known as the Pages of Pain. The giant golden claw reached back and gripped a crumbling building, damaged by the blast, tore it free from its foundations. They looked up, just in time to see 10 tons of stone crash down on their heads. They died screaming. We need to strike back. Words buzzed at her. Eye for an eye. Like a cloud of flies, a sea of stinging gnats, an endless animal bleat that just wouldn't shut up, so too did the people of Zon rage against what they'd lost. Decades of simmering anger had built to this moment. This day. This afternoon. There could be no stopping it now. The bullet was loosed, the genie out the star, the storm unleashed. Tooth for a tooth. Sevika hated it. Anger was all well and good when focused, channeled toward a goal, but this was pure, unfocused wrath. How was anyone supposed to think in this mess? Yeah, evil for evil. Naruto must have thought the same, because he pinched the bridge of his nose and exhaled in a long, drawn-out sigh. He listened to their anger, let it roll over him, wash off his back. Raised a mug, drank deeply from it as she looked on, draining it down to the last drop. Then, slam, he brought the pewter mug crashing down on the bar with such force that it actually shattered. An awful crack filled the air. Sharpened shards bit into his hand, it, but he didn't seem to care for them. Or rather, he did care about things, but not this. Clearly not this. He sat back and leaned against the bar, facing the lot of them, arms propped up against the counter. It made him seem taller for it somehow, like a king looking upon his people. And when he spoke they listened. Quiet. The crowd, nearly 100 strong, fell silent. He'd rounded them all up, gathered them together, and brought them here for gods knew what. Even now the last drop smoldered around them, wounded, but not dead, despite Piltover's best efforts to make it so. A good portion of it still stood, but the building itself had been hollowed out, left scarred and charred. Sevika hoped someone would rebuild it someday, but it wouldn't be her. She'd never been good at building things, only breaking. And now it looked like she'd be doing it again. Because the kid had that look in his eye again, the same that had seen her following him that day. Only now he looked older, colder. Something had hardened in him. Sevika wasn't sure if it was a good thing. She'd seen the enforcer bodies. At least Grayson hadn't been among them. Murdering some mooks was one thing, but offing the head enforcer, that wasn't going to end well. The crowd grew restless. Naruto raised an arm. They fell silent anew. She could see Powder looking at him, waiting for him to make his choice. The right choice. She wondered what it might be. I feel your pain. His voice echoed throughout the charnel house that the last drop had become. The Vander and our wounded come first. Once we've taken care of them, put our dead to rest, we'll move forward. An anxious ripple ran through the crowd. No, Sevika amended, the mob. They were all of a spark from going up in frenzied flame. To hell with the old man and his brats. A burly thug with a shaved head bowled forward. Sevika glimpsed an eye patch. Couldn't remember the name of its owner. His time is over. We need it now. Someone kicked his knee, bringing him low. A knife caressed his throat and his words died with a wither of a wheeze. Say that again. He didn't. Bastard said something else. You damn dirty Jinx, this was your doing, wasn't it? Everyone knows your bad luck. Sevika and Naruto winced as one. Powder hated that name. Even after her training, she treated it like a curse. Powder exhaled slowly, closed her eyes. Sevika counted to 3. Crunch. The thug toppled backward with a yowl, clutching his wide nose. Everyone keeps calling me that Jinx. Powder spat in his face and stomped down on his, kicking him away. I've had enough. Come on. Then she spread her arms and walked forward at him. Come get jinxed. Why, you little. Hands grabbed her as he surged to his feet. Her fist flew upward. So did her attacker. Up he went and down as gravity reasserted itself with a wide vengeance. An awful crack filled the air. Ouch. Sounded like a broken collarbone. No one came as aid. Sevika didn't much blame them. Not after a display like that. Powder looked livid. She couldn't even blame the kid. Not with her family in that state. Naruto sighed. Powder, enough. I know you're stressed, but he's learned his lesson. Fine. She disengaged with a scowl. Blue eyes swung back to the mob. Forgive my apprentice. He didn't sound sorry in the least. She's a bit overeager. He climbed to his feet. Walked to the wounded man. Aren't we all? He laid a hand on the man's arm. Hauled him to his feet now with a golden claw, ignoring the gasp of pain that followed. Why yeah, sure thing, boss. The bruiser groaned. Whatever you say. Did mean nothing by it. One more thing. Naruto slugged him, fast and hard, so quickly that Sevika didn't even truly realize what he'd done until the bastard pitched backward, spitting teeth in. He didn't stop there. Even as he fell, the blonde caught him by the jacket, reeled him for a second blow, then a third now. Only then did he drop his victim. Poor Sod dropped in a quivering, whimpering heap. Naruto pivoted. If any of you ever, and I mean ever, call Powder a Jinx again, she'll be the least of your worries. Blazing red eyes rounded on the rest. They'd been blue a moment before. Are we clear? Muffled assent answered. It was then that she understood. Powder was the dagger in the dark. He was the velvet hammer, the one that spoke softly, but could and would squash you flat. Sevika felt a little thrill shoot through her. This was what a leader looked like. A leader that Vander should have been, yet empathetic in a way Silco yet wasn't. A blend of both, a man balanced on a knife's edge. Those who might listen were all well and good, but those who didn't, they paid for it. As it should be. Vi wept. Where had she gone wrong? It wasn't supposed to be this way. You lied, you said no one would get hurt. She'd done it now. There could be no taking this back. I did. He gazed at her. The man who had drawn her into this, enticed her with his promises, his words of action over Vander and Naruto's inaction. He leaned out the dark, exposing himself behind his desk. And I kept my word. Marcus and his men acted. I had no part in this. Despair sparked in her. But even so you benefit from it. A shrug. I won't deny that. Why? He held up a hand, silencing her protest. You have a choice to make, girl. I can't make it for you. Only you can. What is it you want? Power, safety, or family? Well, what will it be? Vi buried her head in her hands to hide her tears. She failed. Just like everything else. I didn't want this, none of it. A hand settled on her back. None of us did, child. We can only avenge them. She glared at him through her open fingers, and made her decision. A fool in charge of fools. Naruto supposed there was some wicked irony to be had in that. He hadn't wanted to take control of Zahn in Vander's absence, but what choice did he have? It was either this or let them run wild. Rampage in the streets, try to cross the bridge themselves. They could try. They'd fail. There'd be hundreds dead by dawn. More on his hands. So he'd done the only thing he could, made the only choice available to him. Maybe it would restore peace and order. Maybe it wouldn't. He wasn't sure of anything anymore. You did the right thing. Did I, Kurama? He sighed. Doesn't feel like it. In the end, he'd taken up residence in Vander's old office. His was something a humble room, all things considered, painted in faded shades of brown and green, the colors of life and empathy, a chamber that projected strength as much as humility. Light from a blue glass window shone through onto a wide desk and chair, followed by a plush red couch beyond it. He didn't much like the latter, but the position projected strength, and that was what he needed right now. Spartan enough for his needs, given he wouldn't be using it for long. Vander would wake up. The boys, too. They had to. Someone knocked at the door. He sighed. Come in. Sevika slipped inside, closed the door behind her. The kid ain't with you. Told her to take a nap. He doubted Powder would listen, but she needed a chance to cool her head. So did he. He'd set a poor example back in the last drop. Well, out with it. He could feel her staring at him, waiting for his words. The words he had to say. The question he needed to ask. How many more dead? About half a dozen. Each word hurt him. Could have been worse. The last drop wasn't the only place that was hit. Others were, almost simultaneously. She dragged out a chair and sprawled in it before his desk. Your clones figured something was wrong before most of blasts went off. Also, more bad news. More bad luck. Would it never end? Well, out with it. Her face screwed up in a grimace. Milo and Klager are missing. Naruto reared back behind the desk. He'd not been expecting that. And Vi vanished last night. Hey, you don't think she? Naruto was beginning to. The thought sickened him. Was there something else you wanted? Someone, actually. She slapped a piece of paper down on his Vander's desk, all but nailing the photo there with a knife. I think you know what we need to do. He considered it, frowned. You think Silco's behind this? She shrugged. Could be. He's got the motive. No, he shook his head. I don't think this was him. Silco didn't seem the sort to bomb his own people just to force them into action. Not like this. No, there was something else at work here. But what or who? For that matter, Marcus, was he truly that reckless? Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. These tactics felt too heavy-handed, even for him. Did an undersheriff really have that much pull? Marcus, then. His second didn't waver. You've made your fair share of enemies down here. She wasn't wrong. Really, it's Vi I'm worried about. She popped open her flask and drank. Vander's kid. You said it yourself, he grunted when she offered it to him and drank deeply. The burn helped center him. She disappeared before the attack. They might have her. Sevika winced. The girl hates Piltover. I know. No. She slapped a hand down on the knife, driving it deeper. You don't. You think you do, but you haven't heard the full story. 5 firm fingers curled around it, yanked it free. Enforcers killed her and Powder's parents years ago. She's been hating them ever since. I'm told Powder was too young to truly remember what happened, but that kid saw it all. Naruto felt a migraine coming on. Sharp, angry, and a fall of pain. Shit. He'd know the city had done something to wrong her, but not this. He knew where a hatred like that could lead. He'd seen it before, so many times, in his world. If I felt this was justified, if no one was listening to her, if she wasn't getting her way, to whom would she go? Never mind that, what lengths would she go to? Sevika said it before he could. If she's not here, then there's a good chance she's gone to him. A sour taste flooded his mouth. I'm aware. You don't have to tell me. She leaned forward. What are you going to do about it? An idea dawned. Something stupid. Define stupid. He told her. Sevika scoffed. You're cracked. Yup. His head at the desk. Has to be me? Huh. Of course. She thumped his back. Someone else might have gotten it wrong. Ha, he scoffed, the sound hoarse even to his own ears. All right, here's what I need you to do for me. Powder stared into the mirror. A stranger gazed back at her within hollow glass. Matched her motions now as she laid a hand against the thin pane. Even the thin, hesitant smile she wore was the same. She almost didn't recognize the stranger staring back at her. Had she always looked so lean and mean, not thin or even skinny, but strong? She wanted to say yes, but she knew the truth wasn't so simple anymore. Somewhere along the line she'd begun to change. Naruto's training had been the catalyst, but there could be no denying the end result. Vander would have scoffed to hear her say such a thing. Change is a natural part of living. She was growing up. Her hair was longer. She noticed that now she took time to look, yet there was more to it than that. She could see the beginnings of who she was, who she would be in a few years, the faintest glimpse of what her future might become if she continued down this path. And she wasn't sure she liked it. Yes, she had power, but she had to be careful with it, take more care than she ever had before. She'd already hurt Vi, driven Milo and Clagger away. But she was strong now, wasn't she? She had the power to change her fate. Her destiny. Wasn't that worth it? Strong, her reflection sneered at her, startling her terribly. Nah, you're weak. Powder jerked back and closed her eyes. What? No, I'm not. When she looked back to the mirror, she found someone else staring back at her. Not a child. A woman grown, a maddened willowy thing, tall and emaciated with long hair and wild violet eyes. She laughed at her, a pale hand over her mouth, long braids swaying side to side as she giggled madly. You're gonna screw up again. The image before her tittered. He'll abandon you, you know. Powder took a deep breath to steel herself. You're not real, she exhaled, breathing her fear out. Leave me alone. Not real, her future self rasped out a laugh. Listen to yourself, kiddo. You already messed up once. What's to say you won't again? All you do is drive everyone away. Not listening to you. Her madness crooned at her. We both know what you really are. A muscle jumped in her jaw. Stop. What you'll always be. Powder whirled away from the mirror, only to find she couldn't. Confusion bloomed in her heart and found itself strangled by terror. What? How? You think you can just walk away from this? Herself wagged a long finger at her. Nope. Nuha. Negatory after all, you're a. She clamped both hands over her ears. This was a dream. Just a bad dream. That's all it was. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Jinx. Her entire body convulsed. How she hated that word, loathed it with every fiber of her being. It was everything she was, everything she wasn't, everything she would and would not be. She pinched her arm furiously. Pain roared off her wrist, but still she didn't wake up. Her eyes bulged. Why couldn't she wake up? A hand with chipped fingernails settled on her shoulder. Ain't now waking up from this nightmare, honey. This is real. You're awake. Powder whirled, but no one was there. Just her and the smiling mirror. You're a jinx. The mirror laughed at her. No way around it. She hunkered down, staring at the floor. I said stop. They only laughed louder. Jinx. Knock it off already. Jinx. Powder whirled away and bashed her head against the wall. Once, twice, thrice now. The pain left her with a roaring headache, but it also brought her clarity and silenced the voice. She took a small shuddering breath, looked back to the mirror now. It was silent and still, her own pensive, frustrated face stared back at her. She exhaled softly, covered her eyes with one hand, then slumped against the wall. Silence at last. She was safe. She was fine. She was all right. Must have been the stress getting to her. Yeah, that was it. Nothing to worry about. She wasn't losing her mind. She wasn't divided by. Cold lips brushed her ear, a whisper soft as a feather's brush. Jinx. Powder's eyes in her world went red. Raorg. Her temper sparked, sanity snapped, and herself screamed. She swung at her doppelganger, her madness with a shriek. Clenched knuckles barreled into the mirror head-on, a singular chakram-powered punch. Herself shattered. Broken glass tumbled to the floor, fracturing into countless images of herself. They laughed at her, loud now, louder, loudest. Powder. She jolted and came back to herself. Why did her hand hurt so much? Naruto poked his head in from the hall, regarding her and the broken mirror with a pensive expression. Sure enough, his eyes were drawn to her white knuckles. He took one look at the broken glass at her feet. What happened here? Shame turned her face red. She looked away with a huff. Nothing. He entered the room fully. Powder. She wilted under her mentor's stern gaze. I got a little too excited. All right, it's nothing. Doesn't look like nothing to me. She never knew if or when he saw through her, couldn't tell if now was one of those times. But for all that, he didn't mock her. He simply knelt, pulled a roll of gauze from his pack with one hand, conjured up a chakra limb with the other and offered that palm to hers. His intent was clear. Even so, she found herself too stubborn to respond. Her mentor tutted softly. Hand. She placed her Y fingers in his. No fair. His hand was so damn big. It dwarfed hers in every way. Rather than retort, Naruto sighed softly and began the painstaking process of wrapping her Y knuckles. It was a surprisingly tender gesture from someone who professed next to no experience in the realm of first aid. A gentle golden glow stemmed from his fingertips, speeding the healing on, but not mending it completely. Maybe he was distracted. As he worked, she got a better look at him. Rather, his outfit. He'd changed it since she'd seen him last. Gone were his colorful clothes. In their places he wore an outfit of purest black, its hood slumped over his shoulders. Judging by the fabric bunching around his neck, had half mask to wear, too. She almost snorted at the sight of it. She knew ninja were meant to wear all black, but still. She looked him up and down, frowned. That outfit looks awful. It's only temporary, and I need it for what I'm about to do. He tousled her hair. I'm going to settle things tonight and take responsibility for this. For all of it. She knew what he was going to say next. I can help, don't tell me to stay here. He winked down at her. Wouldn't dream of it, kid. You with me? She quivered at the trust in his eyes. Till the end. Good. I've got an outfit for you, too. He pulled a parcel from his pouch and gave it to her. Get dressed. I'll be waiting in the hall. Powder had never moved so quickly in all her life. She donned the black attire hastily, clumsily, fearing he'd leave her behind. Sure enough, Naruto awaited her just outside the door. He looked her up and down. Nodded now. Ready. She nodded eagerly. Good. Naruto tugged up his hood. Follow me. Together, they vanished into the shadows. The shadows stirred. Perhaps blurred was the better word, Powder mused, given how fast they were moving across the rooftops. Everything was a mottled mess in the gloom, streaks of dreary buildings and the fires burning below in the smog. From this height, she could barely make sense of it all. Zaun never had much light to begin with, and even less to see by at night, but now it was downright gloomy. Hardly anyone was out at this hour, and those that did were up to nothing good. All around them the city seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for that moment, that spark, to plunge into oblivion. She knew why. They were preparing for war. For war there would be, and soon, should she and Naruto fail. People would die, dozens if not hundreds on both sides, and all that would be on their hands. That was an awfully unpleasant thought, knowing they had to do this right, tonight, or there would be dire consequences. Regardless of that, Powder found herself hard-pressed to follow Naruto, even struggling to keep up with him. For all her growth leaps and bounds above the poor, pitiful wretch she'd been before, it was a humbling reminder of just how far she still had to go. It was also kinda exciting. To know one day she would be just that fast. Maybe even faster. Without warning, gloom of Zaun gave way to the dull lights of Piltover's bridge up ahead. She could see the guards even from here, a horde of enforcers milling about at the crossing with their spotlights, each ready and willing to slaughter anyone foolish enough to charge the bottleneck as they had all those years ago. As if they'd do that twice. People had been desperate then, they were smarter now. And unlike most, she and Naruto weren't bound by gravity. She missed time to jump and cursed as she struck a rooftop at an awkward angle, rolled to bleed off momentum, and tumbled unsteadily to her feet, still moving against her will. The edge of another building yawned before, and then she had to leap again or risk an equally nasty fall. Sloppy. She was better than that. Nerves must be getting to her. Focus. Must focus. Don't get distracted. Rather than risk the main thoroughfare, Naruto shot up the scaffolding itself. She pelted after him. He pulled ahead of her, laughing softly under his breath, and Powder redoubled her efforts with a startled gasp, realizing too late what her mentor intended. It was reckless. Suicidal, even. Anyone else would have hesitated. Fast, faster, fastest. Naruto didn't falter for a moment. He threw himself at the gap between the bridges without fear, his body a blazing blur of black in the gloom, heedless of the small army below. A great lunging leap carried him the rest of the way, then he was gone, arcing up over the bridge to safety on the other side. She saw him hit the roof of a distant building and pivot, waiting. She thought she heard another peal of laugh carried her way on the wind. Might have been her imagination. No one challenged him, because no one saw them. Idiots never looked up. Then it was her turn to throw herself into oblivion. Wind whipped at her face, forcing Powder to pour on still more speed while she could. She didn't dare slow down now for fear of botching her jump and alerting the enforcers. To slip was to fall, and to fall was to fight. She wasn't optimistic about her odds of survival. Not against that many. The end of bridge rushed up at her and she rushed headlong at it. All too soon she ran out of room to run and Okura and yap. Powder flooded chakra to her legs, tensed, and kicked herself into the air. The bridge fell away beneath her at speed, taking the world with it, and several buildings besides. Wait. Buildings. She'd used too much chakra, hadn't she? Way too much. Too fast. She had half an instant to realize her mistake. Overshot, then the roof of one of said buildings rushed up to greet her like an old friend. Her arms pinwheeled in the air in a vain attempt to bleed off her momentum. She closed her eyes and braced for the awful impact. This was gonna leave one hell of a bruise. Wasn't it? Strong arms caught her, wheeled her around to safety, and set her down as one might a small child. which she still was, but still. Powder creaked an eye open. Sure enough, Naruto stared down at her, wearing a bemused expression. No need to rush. He chuckled ruefully and reached back to rub her head. Take your time. She ducked out from under his hand with a scowl. I'm not rushing. You're moving too fast for me. Only then did she realize how close he was, that he was still holding her by the shoulders. Her face went red. She flailed out of his grasp with a squeak. He hummed out a laugh and let her be. She couldn't see the rest of his face with that mask of his, but those blue eyes betrayed a liveliness of their own. Or they did, until turned to look out across the waterfront. What do you see? Powder blinked, not quite comprehending what he meant. The buildings. Push chakra to your eyes and look again. She did as he told her. It wasn't night vision, not in the truest sense of the word, but it was a far cry from fumbling blindly in the dark. Her eyes focused and her surroundings became just a tad bit brighter, enough to see by the low light. She glimpsed one building, larger than the others, carved from white stone, and pointed it out. Good. Naruto hummed his approval. That's our destination. Come on. He bounded to another rooftop ahead of them, leaving her to follow in his wake. Curiosity nagged at her. It really was nice having a mentor. Almost made her wonder what it would like to be one. Naruto's teaching style was relatively informal for the most part, and she hoped to mimic it someday when she was older. Just thinking about it set off a little firework of excitement in her. Will I have an apprentice of my own someday, she asked between leaps. You will. Naruto didn't look back. He only had eyes for their target. I'm sure of it. Powder liked that. For some reason the idea of taking on a proper student proved strangely appealing. It gave her something to think about as they flitted from one rooftop to the other. A student? She had no idea who it would be, of course, but the idea that she could swiftly took root in her. How many pupils would she have? 1, 2, 3, maybe she could open a school or an academy. Yeah, she liked the sound of that. Her mind whirled with endless possibilities, churning like the ocean itself. Right up until her face smacked into Naruto's back. She shot him a glower. Hey, what gives? He pointed down. She looked that way. Realization dawned as she edged over and saw the Whitestone building, now beneath their very feet. A balcony awaited them below, a proper one with a railing and a garden and everything. Oh, they'd arrived, hadn't they? Had she been that lost in her thoughts that she'd failed to notice? 2 guards at the door. Naruto indicated 2 dark shapes in the gloom, standing before an archway. Think you can take them down quietly? Quietly, Powder wasn't sure and said as much. Naruto waved her on. Go ahead. I'll back you up if things go south. That only made her more nervous. She didn't want to fail, not in front of him. Right. Deep breaths. She could do this. She had to do this. She must. Just step off the edge. Powder dropped. It was the simplest thing to slide down the roof and let gravity do half the work for her. Momentum was her best friend. She crashed down on the shoulders of the first, clamped both hands over his mouth to muffle the cry that followed. From there she gripped his neck with her legs, threw him forward, and slammed his face into a wall. Something crunched in his face. He crumpled to the ground with a groan. Gotcha, one down. What? His unlucky compatriot had only just begun to turn her way when Powder pivoted. She watched his eyes widen in comical surprise. The unprofessional oath he uttered and the subsequent voice crack was sweet, sweet music to her ears. She swept his legs and sent him sprawling. His head smacked against the hard floor, stunning him. A quick stomp and made certain he stayed there and didn't get back up. The first was rising behind her now, reaching for a baton. Clenched knuckles at his face in a vicious flying right hook. Must have had a glass chin. He crumpled like a house of cards. Just like that, victory was hers. Powder stood over them and released a breath she hadn't even realized she'd been holding. Well done. She looked up and found Naruto sitting on the railing, clapping his hands. You've been practicing. Her cheeks burned at the praise and she managed a short, jerky nod. There it was, another bit of praise doled out for her to snap up. If he knew how much she craved them, he might not be so forthcoming. Or perhaps he did know and didn't care. Either way, she savored it all the same. Come on. He hopped off the fail, gave her a nudge. Let's go pay Grayson a visit. There was no one left to challenge them now, no one to prevent his egress. Naruto knocked on the door with a smile. Hello is Grayson and I'd like you a word. By all means, a muffled voice issued from behind the door. Come in, make yourself at home. Naruto eased the door open, taking point just in case they encountered any traps. There were none. Grayson was waiting for them, sat behind her desk. An earthen of brandy and 2 cups, each filled to the brim. Powder took her in at a glance was a tan woman with dark eyes and darker hair. She wore her uniform well. Naruto had briefed her on this woman. She was the sheriff of Piltover, a dear friend of the Harem family, and quite possibly one of the only people who could keep this mess from boiling over into outright war. So why did she look so damnably stressed? I thought you might come. She had a husky, gravelly voice and an easy smile as she gestured to the glasses. Please, have a seat. Naruto swept himself into it and tugged down his mask. Powder didn't dare to the same. You expected us. The sheriff sighed. Dear girl, I expected him. Not you. Your mentor's been making waves. Naruto snatched up one of the glasses and knocked it back. Wouldn't have to if you did your job. I don't have the same freedoms you do. She retorted, yet mirrored him all the same. The people want someone to blame for that incident. This won't go away. Her mentor snorted. Of course it won't. Can't have your precious posh citizens threatened now. Can we the nobles piss and while child starve and die as life goes on? Don't be rude, boy. My name is Naruto, and I'm being honest. He took up the bottle and poured for himself, then sent it sliding her way. We wouldn't have half these problems if you people weren't so damn fixated on keeping Zon from crossing the bridge. Up his glass went, then down again. Is it any wonder some of them try to escape? Do you have any idea what it's like in Zon? This time, Grayson poured for them. I've come over the border a time or two. I'm well aware. Then you know why I'm here. She drank. I do. Things need to change. Naruto gave his cup a twirl, watching the amber liquid swirl in the glass. And they're going to. Whether you like it or not. We can make it peaceful, or why? I'd prefer the former to be honest, but at this point, it might be the latter. What makes you say that? I've seen the people. Naruto tipped his glass back, drained it, and waved for another. Listen to them. The glass came down with a soft clink, yet there was something in the noise that made Powder flinch all the same. I support peace in all its forms. What your people are doing is the exact opposite of peace. 4 children snuck into Piltover and your men have been hunting them like dogs. For what a tan hand snatched up the bolt, and in a moment, their glasses were refilled once more. Accidents happen all the time. This was no mere accident. They stole from the Harem family. Did anyone die? No. There you have it. Naruto leaned back in his chair. What were you going to do once your boys caught them? Anyway, hang them, throw them in a cell to rot for the rest of their days. Because I'm sure that will go over well. Speaking of disturbing the peace, Grayson's gaze strayed to Powder, noticing her once more, or rather her features. Her courage shriveled under that keen sight. Eyewitnesses saw 4 children at the scene of the crime. One was a girl with blue hair. I take it this is she. Powder's stomach inverted. Mustn't speak. Mustn't say a word. Mustn't give herself away. Naruto tilted his head, the very picture of calm. And what if she is? Grayson's face betrayed just a hint of regret. Then I would have to take her into custody. Blue eyes narrowed to blazing azure slits. All around them, the night air grew heavy, clogging their lungs. Powder felt her throat close. Anxiously, tentatively, she looked to Naruto. Her mentor didn't shout or scream at Grayson, didn't snarl, didn't stand up, or even throw his glass at her. She almost wished he would do something, anything, if only to break this awful silence. Oh, no. He didn't do any of those things. He just stared at Grayson. Stared, as the older woman quailed under his gaze. Powder had grown so used to him smiling, to seeing him happy, always cheery, even when he was upset. But he wasn't laughing now. When he finally spoke, his voice was colder than ice itself. You may try. Left unspoken was the warning. Then you will die. Powder shivered a little. He'd kill for her. Why did that excite her so? Vander is a good man. Grayson temporized, wiping a bead of sweat from her borwa. He'd never allow such a senseless slaughter. You're right. Naruto conceded with a nod of his own. He is a good man. Your boy Marcus blew up his pub. I like that pub. People died in that pub. Vander nearly did. His fingers bit down into the desk, etching a series of fine fractures into the wood. He's in no shape to lead at the moment, so you're dealing with me. Grayson pulled a face, perhaps sympathizing with him. Or perhaps not. If what you say is true, then Marcus will be disciplined. Disciplined by some soft Piltover court liable to give him little more than a slap on the wrist. Not good enough. Naruto planted a hand on her desk and leaned forward, looming over her. Hand him over to me and we'll call it square. You know I can't do that. You can, but you won't. He made a rude gesture with one hand and made to stand. Seems Sevika was right. Coming here was a mistake. I thought we could talk things over and come to an agreement, but you clearly don't respect me the way you do, Vander. What happened to that famed neutrality of yours? Negotiations are over. The sheriff eyed him warily. Why are you here, then, if not to negotiate? To give you a warning. He tutted. This nonsense needs to stop. If it doesn't, you'll have a war on your hands. I don't think you want that. Credit where it was due, the old broad didn't flinch. That's the second time you've said that. Are you threatening me? No threats here, only promises, Sheriff. Naruto tapped a finger to his forehead. Think about it, wait. He craned his neck suddenly, regarding something only he could see. We have company. Figures. They were bound to notice us sooner or later. He was still speaking when the door crashed open behind them, admitting a squad of 4 enforcers, each armed and armored to the teeth. The largest of them slammed a rifle at the back of Naruto's head with intent, pressing the barrel against his skull. Hands in the air. Naruto reached down and drained the last of his glass. If you think something like that will kill me, you're sorely mistaken. Grayson swore softly. Put the guns down, you fools. Naruto blew out an aggravated sigh. Powder. She gulped. Yeah. Her mentor turned a winning smile on her. Duck. She did, and he grabbed Grayson's desk, lazily tossing it over his shoulder. Down went the enforcers, sprawling over one another. She could see more from the doorway. Naruto stood with a leisurely yawn and cracked his neck from side to side. All right, then. He dove on them with a wicked grin. Let the lesson begin. The world dissolved into a wide blender of violence. It was madness. Powder had the foresight to duck Grayson's desk when it whistled overhead, but that was the end of her luck, because all hell broke loose in its wake. Naruto leaped onto the tumbling desk and kicked it at the enforcers as one might soccer, bowling them over in the dozens. Then he started swinging. Men and women flew left and right between his fists, and then there were more of them. No, more of him. Dozens more. Countless shadow clones swarming down the lot of them. He wasn't holding back, or if he was, not by much. Would she be able to do that? Someday she hoped so. That looked amazing. Marcus, he roared a laugh that made her very soul shiver. Come out and play. Marcus, I'll crack every damn skull in this building until you do. He really would, she realized. No one could stop him. He was tearing through every enforcer Piltover had to offer. For every blow they landed on him, he struck back with ever more, 10,000 fists in the air. Piltover's people never stood a chance. Wasn't even a proper contest. Freeze, you. One of said enforcers must have thought her an easier target, because they rounded on her and opened fire. Powder swayed aside from first, blocked the second, and caught the third, much to her great delight. She blinked down at the lead casing caught in her grasp. I can catch bullets. Naruto's voice boomed at her. Less talking, more smacking. Yes, sir. The enforcer took one look at her, threw down his gun and clasped both hands behind his head with a warped whimper. Be gentle. Her fist thundered into the side of his head and he went down like a puppet cut from its strings. Powder pivoted on one heel and threw herself into Naruto's brawl with a whoop. And for the next few hours, there was only blissful melee. That was amazing. You were all whoosh, bam, pow. You weren't half bad yourself. Really? You think so? I know so. Heh. Powder hid a smile in her sleeve as she launched herself forward, a checker-propelled leap carrying her to the next rooftop. Naruto remained a step ahead of her, but after that brawl, she found she didn't much mind. In the end, Marcus hadn't shown his ugly mug, which implied he wasn't present among other things. Still, they'd gotten away clean, racing over the rooftops of Piltover. She was sure they'd been noticed, but with most of the enforcers broken, there was no one to challenge them. Naturally, that left her mind to drift toward other matters. What comes next? Next, he thumbed his chin considering in mid-leap. Next we see what Marcus does. He's probably gone to ground by now after our little stunt, but he's bound to make a mistake sooner or later, and when he does, he'll lead us right to his partner in crime. If it's who I think it is, we might find Vi and the others there. Hesitation is defeat. She knew that. And yet, she had to ask, are we doing the right thing? Naruto paused on a rooftop and granted her a brief sidelong look as she did the same. What makes you say that? I mean, she shrugged one shoulder, unable to omit his gaze. We beat up a lot of people tonight, might have killed some of them, too. His hand patted her shoulder. You care enough to ask, Powder. That makes you a good person in my books. Better than me at any rate. She had to ask. Why didn't we go after the council or the Kuremans? Naruto turned to face her fully. Why do you think? His grin grew. Why did we go for Grayson and her enforcers first? Crap, he was making this a lesson, wasn't he? Think, Powder, think because they were the most prevalent threat. He showed no sign of approval. And why were they the most dangerous? Realization downward. She controlled the manpower of Piltover. Naruto clapped once. Correct. His head bobbed in approval. Now anything we face might be a state guards, but not a concentrated force. Well done. He looked like he might ruffle her hair for a moment, but her thunderous scowl held him at bay instead. You learn quickly and ask the right questions. Grandma would have liked you. Grandma. Tsunade. He cycled through a quick transformation jutsu, briefly taking the shape of a blonde woman with a truly staggering bosom before changing back again, wearing a wry smile. Don't worry about the council or the Kuremans, we're visiting them next. Which ones? Kuremans first because they have undue influence in the city, Naruto counted off on one hand, Melmetal a second because she's a clever I've got a GT to drop on, and then well, I'll deal the last one myself. It ain't anything for you to worry. She wrinkled her nose at that. Who's Melmetal? Naruto's smile dimmed. A prominent council member, one I should have nipped in the bud a while ago. And Powder. He drew her into a quick hug, pressing her head against his as he held her close. You did great tonight. Powder felt her face burn with pride. She buried in his jacket to hide it from him. Thanks, boss. He barked a rueful laugh all his own. I swear I'll never get used to you calling me that. But it sounded like he was sending her away. She didn't want that. No. I can help more, you know. She looked up at him, flicking a pleading gaze his way. I can deal with the Kuremans while you meet this Mel person. Deal with the Naruto arched a golden eyebrow at her, and for a moment her master, her mentor, her man, what he would be hers when she grew up, come hell or high water, seemed older beyond his years. And what do you think I wanted to do to them? Who kicked their asses? No. He flicked her forehead gently, drawing a pout from her. Listen, Powder. When you have power like ours, it's tempting to think of every problem as a nail to hammer down, but sometimes you can with words rather than a wallop. Do you understand? I think so. I do, she amended quickly at his bemused expression. I can do it. Help you, Please, let me help you. Naruto considered her for a long moment. She clasped her hands and made the most pitiful noise she could. At length, Naruto heaved a sigh. Fine, I'll leave 3 shadow clones with you. She understood the theory well enough, one to watch her back, the second to guard the perimeter, and a third in case of ambush. It was a handicap, and one she wasn't necessarily proud of, but still progress. I won't let you down. I never thought you would. He leaned back to regard her. Have you mastered the transformation jutsu like I taught you? She scuffed a foot across the floor. I can use it pretty darn well, but I wouldn't say mastered. After all, she was more interested in the Rasengan and being a sage. Powder. She whined a little. Sorry. They both knew the reason. No one was going to take a child seriously, superpowers or otherwise. Besides, this would keep her identity safe from further retribution. But a ninja had to look beneath the underneath, didn't they? At least she was pretty sure that was the saying. Was there someone you wanted me to disguise myself as I've been practicing? Watch this. Now wait just a second. Too late. Powder made a seal with her hands and vanished in a plume of smoke. She'd used her imagination, but she'd practiced this one. She knew how she looked on the outside. She stood nearly of a high with him, her long azure hair bound back in a flowing braid bearing a blade at the end. Why a blade? Because blades were badass. She was lean and strong and firm, and this was what she would be in a few years. The very epitome of a healthy young woman who would never become Jinx. While she planted a hand on her hip, reveling in her older voice. How do I look? Naruto coughed into a fist and averted his gaze. Please change back. Powder made smug powder noises but did as he asked. There, she'd seen the spark of interest in his eyes just now. Victory was hers. His reaction just now was all the confirmation she needed, proof that she is on the right route. She just had to stay the course, just needed to be patient. Wait a few years for him, then when she was of age, she would marry him someday. No one else would do. So we're clear on the plan, then. Her head bobbed. He ruffled her hair fondly and vanished in a body flicker. Powder waited until she was certain he was gone, until she could sense his chakra well on the other side of the city. He couldn't possibly hear her now, right? She dithered a moment more, then threw her head back and pumped a fist into the air. Yes, someone coughed behind her. Ahem. She turned to find the 3 shadow clones behind her. They weren't coming. Silco tapped a finger against his desk. Why weren't they coming? They should be here by now. His tapping intensified, bordering on outright mania when nothing happened. It didn't make any sense. He baited the hook, taken the children, and left more than enough clues. So why weren't they here? Marcus came crashing around the corner, red-faced and spitting. There you are, he spluttered. I want every gun we have focused on that man. I don't care who sees. Drop a damn building on him. If that's what it takes, kill him. Now he's made a fool of me. I won't let it stand. You hear, we had a deal, and it's time for you to honor it. Silco's good eye blinked once. Wait, if he wasn't here. But that meant, oh no, Caitlin had grown accustomed to nightmares. She was just a child after all. Everyone had them, she knew. From a purely logical standpoint, there was no reason to be afraid. Nightmares were just that, bad dreams, something banished upon waking to face the day. It was simple rationale. Nothing to fear from the dark and all that. Easier said than done. Someone tapped her shoulder. She rolled over in bed, made an annoyed noise, and squinted at them. Mother. A grinning face stared back at her, inches from her own. Not mother. Not father, either. Her heart leaped into her throat. Little Caitlin screamed, why murder? A hand clamped over her mouth. Then she passed clean out. Powder poked her cheek. That was easy. Good evening, I've come to bargain. They were gentle words, noble words, spoken from one leader to another. Naruto had a rather hard time believing them, given the knife scent against her throat. She could feel it was surely as the pillow against her head, the cold sweat even now beating upon her brow. In hindsight, she knew it was foolish of her to let her guard down like this. She'd made enemies throughout her career, climbed atop the shoulders of others to stand where she was now, backstabbed her enemies and allies alike, all to reach the highest point. It was only logical that one might seek to confront her here in her chambers, in her very bed, where she was most vulnerable. Still, she considered herself a woman of reason. He hadn't slit her throat yet. That must count for something, surely. What do you want? Warm breath caressed her ear. A moment of your time, nothing more. Mel shivered a little despite herself. She wasn't sure if tea was from fear or excitement. Terrifying as this was, as the prospect of imminent death might be, it had certainly broken the boring humdrum of her routines. Do you know who I am? She did, or suspected at the very least. Naruto Uzumaki of Zon. Presently of Zon. He corrected her with a rueful laugh. Formerly off, well, let's call it somewhere else. Where? You wouldn't know it. Stall. Buy time. Do something, anything. Rest assured, I'm rather well-traveled. Even so, you haven't been where I'm from. The knife tightened against her jugular, drawing a bead of. Still, the fact that you know me makes this easier. It means you know why I'm here. Saves me the spiel. So why don't we talk this out like adults? She stifled a gulp. If you remove the knife from my throat, I'd be more than happy to. Naruto smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. A tempting proposal, but I think not. Naruto stifled a whimper in her throat. What do you want? I want you. His words made her shiver again, for an entirely different reason. Sending the wrong message there. You're going to help me with my little Piltover problem. This time, she did gulp. And why me come to me with this? Why not Sheriff Grayson or the Kuramans? Her captor smiled. Who's to say I haven't already? You could be my third stop for all you know. Was she? The thought nearly unnerved her. If H was making the rounds through the city, no one had noticed. I'd like us to be friends, Mel. He crooned suddenly, startling her. I can be a very good friend, but you don't want to be my enemy. She hazarded a grimace. You seem to have a great deal of those. For some reason that seemed to amuse him. Everybody wants to be my enemy. Most of them will either be my friend in a few days or they'll be dead. I'd prefer you not be among that number. So here's what you're going to do for me, and what I intend to do for you. I'd appreciate it if you could hear me out. He laid out his plan for her, for Piltover and Zon, in clear, distinct terms. By the end of it, Mel found she couldn't think straight. Piltover was not prepared for them. They were logical enough, she supposed. Weren't revolutionaries supposed to be madmen all pomp and passion, but with little in the way of thoughts? His scheme suggested otherwise. He'd been dwelling on this for a terribly long time. A less coup. Well, she supposed there would be if she refused his offer. She doubted he'd come all the way here without the resolve to kill her. She, however, wasn't prepared to die. There was still so much wanted to say, wanted to do. She wasn't ready. She didn't want to go. Suppose I agree, she hazarded a gulp, grimacing as the knife dug into her throat. How long would this partnership of ours last? Longer than you'd think, shorter than you'd expect. The panic button beneath her pillow. If she could just reach it. Surely there are more pleasurable ways of negotiating, wouldn't you agree? She leaned back against him, pressing her body flush against his in an attempt to get at it. Naruto scoffed. Go ahead, press your big red button. Nobody's coming. It's a shame, really. He heaved a sigh, and though she couldn't see his face, she had the distinct sensation he was smiling. You're a beautiful woman, Melmetada, but you're also a schemer. Never could bring myself to love one of those. Be a bit more honest with yourself and I'll consider it in the future. The knife left her throat. I'll be in touch. See you soon. Malworld, too late. He was already gone. Silco heard them. He knew what to listen for, of course, which helped quite a bit in the long run. That faint sound of feet against metal, of boots running the roof, two shadows racing against the moonlight to bring swift revenge down upon his head. A lesser man would have been frightened. Not him. He'd been looking forward to this. It was, as they say, inevitable. Now that they'd finished causing chaos in the Piltover with the sheriff, the council, and the Kuromansan with Vander still indisposed after that explosion at the last drop of shame. Really, he didn't endorse what Marcus had done and 3 of his 4 precious children missing. Well, it was only natural they came after him. Tonight, everything would change, one way or another. It was a little crude, he would admit, the base violence necessary for change. But the topsiders wouldn't listen and he had nothing left to lose. Victory wasn't a necessity in the war to come. He just had to scare them. Then they wouldn't dare set foot in the underground again. And on the off chance they did, Silco. He looked away from the ceiling to find Vi tugging at his arm. She truly was a diamond in the rough, this one, a gem just waiting to be polished. Truly, she was wasted on Vander. He'd been a fool, filling her head with idealistic nonsense. It was he who had shown her the truth of the world. Power, real power, didn't come to those who were born strongest, or fastest, or even smartest. No, it came to those who will do anything to achieve it. She understood that now. Nothing could change without power. It was the currency that made the world go round. He looked at her for a long moment, considering this tired, exhausted girl. He'd been right all along. Vi was the real prize. Such spite this one had. Such seething rage. Such hate. By comparison, her brothers were so much chaff. He would happily welcome them to his side, of course, should they make the right choice, but he wouldn't particularly miss them if they didn't. But they mattered to Vi and were an effective means, so he would keep them for now. They're coming, aren't they? Indeed they are. He heard a shout in the distance. Come along. It's time. She let him guide her away while the rest of his followers finished their preparations, but he didn't miss her sidelong look. What do you want exactly? He'd been waiting for that very question. Respect, opportunity, everything they denied us. He led her to an adjacent room across the walkway, beckoned her closer and bid her sit in a chair. Your father, that is to say Vander, and I, shared a vision. A dream of freedom. Not just for the lanes but the whole of the underground, united as one. The nation of Zaun. Her brow furrowed in consternation. You know the topsiders won't let us. I know. He patted her head, drawing an annoyed noise from her. You see, child, the only way to defeat a superior enemy is to stop at nothing to become what they fear. I hated your father for a time, but he had my respect, because I feared him, or rather, what he could become until he made peace with Piltover. Just thinking of it made his infected eye ache. When the Sokol Hound of the Underground chose to play lapdog to our oppressors after everything we suffered, I knew it was time to act. Now we have the power to do. He withdrew 3 vials from his vest. Vi tensed. Doubtless she suspected 1 vial was for her. But the other 2, shimmer. He held it up before her, letting her glimpse the ominous violet liquid within. Singed has perfected the formula. Vi hesitated, eyeing the vial as one might a snake, poised to bite. But you said it was dangerous. Anything is dangerous in enough doses. His fingers twirled the vial on his knuckles for a moment before presenting it to her. This is the power you seek. With this, no one will ever be able to hurt you ever again. With this, he emphasized the words once more, never once looking away from her. We can finally realize the dream held by all of the lanes for so long. Will you and your brothers die for a cause, or will you fight for one? Her fingers closed around the vial and his. Vi looked at him for a long moment. I'll fight. I'll make Milo and Clagger understand, too. Silco felt something strangely akin pride in that moment. That's my girl. It was easy to slip inside. Almost too easy, wasn't it? No one challenged them as they crept inside the dilapidated building. That was Naruto's first warning. He could see people within, lurking in the lower levels, yet not one of them challenged him or powder. Not a single, solitary soul so much as glanced their way. Come on, he knew people never looked up, but this was ridiculous. Even the most basic of basic thugs should at least have their wits about them. They kept low to the ground and kept quiet, yet still, it was strange that they didn't encounter a single guard. Stranger still, he couldn't sense Powder's siblings. Not Vi or Clagger or even that annoying Milo. Come to think of it, he couldn't sense anyone nearby, save Powder. Nothing, just a void. Did Silco have some way of masking their presence? Maybe that singed fellow he was working with had figured something out. And what was that ominous chill he felt in the air? I've got a bad feeling about this. Yeah, Kurama didn't need to tell him twice. He tried to rally his rampant emotions with a more pleasant thought exercise. Piltover was essentially paralyzed. Their enforcers had been gutted, their council paralyzed by indecision, the Kuramans brought to heel after Powder had a friendly little chat with them. The three pillars of the city, once so prosperous and proud, had been brought low. Why, the whole of the lanes could probably march right across the bridge and face little resistance. But not yet. Sevika would see to that. She was rallying them even now, gathering them, rallying every able-bodied man and woman she could scrounge up. Once he finished here, he intended to lead them with his little surprise. But only after they retrieved Powder's siblings. His apprentice elbowed him. He looked her way, frowning a little as she flicked a finger towards a fortified door across a catwalk. Someone had bothered to barricade it, but done so crudely, like they'd just slapped a few latches on it and called things a day. Suspicious, but it also seemed too simple. What were the chances that the first door they'd found would be the one they sought? Think she's in there. She beamed at him through her half-mask. Seems as good a place to look as any. He took the lead as they crept across the catwalk. Still no challenge. Not even the most meager of resistance. It was a simple matter to break the locks. From there Powder grasped the handle and swung the door open on its hinges. An empty room awaited them with an equally empty chair, its shackles undone. What Powder hissed and tugged down her mask in confusion. There's no one here. Realization dawned. No guards, no interference. An open narrow walkway leading to an unlocked, empty cell. It had been easy. Far too easy. Which could only mean this was a trap. Welcome, a familiar voice intoned behind them. You have my congratulations for making it this far. Step into the cell and restrain yourselves. In return, you won't be harmed. He already knew who he would find behind them when he turned. It didn't stop him from pivoting regardless. Sure enough, there he was, with all his goons in tow. A quick head count confirmed it, more than a dozen of them. Silco. He blew out a sharp, aggravated breath. You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. The mogul tilted his head. We had an agreement, didn't we? You broke it first. So I did. His smile held no warmth, didn't even reach his eye. Old habits, I suppose. You see, a knife flicked out in his hand, visible for a moment, then quickly sheathed. I simply can't stand the idea of an outsider usurping my dream. You've done a great deal of work for me, work that would have taken my years to accomplish alone. For that, I thank you. Powder bowled past him. Where's Vi? Why, she's right here. Silco stepped aside, and his so-called soldiers did the same. As are the rest of your dear siblings. Remarkably, he was telling the truth. Vi and the kids looked healthy. There were no shackles on them. They weren't held captive. They were free, their faces grim. And in an awful instant he understood. Silco must have turned them somehow, convinced each of them, brought them round to his way of thinking. All three of them. Powder must have realized it as well, because she made a pained noise. Vi, why are you standing over there? I'm doing the right thing, Powder. Vi's dirty face turned her way. You should, too. She hiccuped painfully. Vi. Her sister looked away and Naruto felt Powder's emotions twist painfully in her. Milo, she sought her siblings in vain. Flagger, what's going on? The latter wouldn't look her in the eye. But the former, what's it look like? Milo swaggered forward, hands on his hips. We're making the smart play and getting payback. What other choice do we have? It's all thanks to you, Jinx. Powder shivered and fought down a pained cry at his side. Don't call me that, I'm not a Jinx. You are her so-called brother, hissed back. Look how this turned out. Naruto caught her shoulder before she could surge forward. Milo Vi snapped at him. Shut it. Two choices lay before you. Silco held out a hand. The first, I find, is the easiest. Join us. Finish what you started under my leadership. Just think of what we can achieve if we work together. When neither made any effort to capitulate, his brow creased. Or you can die. The choice is yours. Never, Powder burst out, teeth bared. You tried to kill Vander. I had no part in bombing the last drop, child. Much his annoyance, the mad mogul remained calm as ever. Join me, and I'll happily hand you the true culprit's head on a silver platter. You're here for him too, aren't you? A strangled noise echoed somewhere from the back of the crowd. It sounded an awful lot like Marcus. This wasn't part of the deal. Silco shrugged. Deals changed. So they thought it was that simple, did they? Not a chance. You don't seem to understand. Naruto craned his neck and spotted the battered enforcer a ways near the exit. I'll be leaving with his head, one way or the other. Silco blew out a quick, exasperated breath. Only monsters like us deal in absolutes. We will do what we must. Fine. A tired sigh pierced the foggy gloom. You will try. Silco smiled again, and this time that smile held an edge, but I'm afraid this will be a very short reunion. You remember Deckard, don't you, Powder? Some scraggly blonde boy emerged from the pack of people, clutching a vial in his hand, red in the face. Powder squinted at him. Who know? Apparently the boy remembered her. I finally found you, you little shit. You made a fool of me, I'll make you pay. Powder quirked a brow. Deckard, was it Scram? I don't have time for. The boy tipped a vial back and drank deep from within. His muscles bulged, twisted, as his body grew. And he became something more. Die. Powder quailed at the sight. Naruto gripped her shoulder. You can do this. Remember, you're stronger than you know. He saw the resolve harden in her eyes. Gotcha. He stepped past her and walked up to Silco. A big bruiser tried to get in his way. Clonk. Not for long. That's your weakness, boy. Silco tutted at him as he stepped over the man's stunned form. You carry your chin so high you fail to see the opportunity below. We're not so different, you and I, we both want the same things. Equality, justice, lies hidden behind pithy preaching. What you're doing here isn't justice. Isn't it? A wry smile tugged at his scarred face. Rest assured, I know full well I stand no chance against you in a fair fight, which is why I came prepared. There was something in his voice just then, an odd hitch that left him ill at ease. Didn't you think it odd? Silco crooned at him. Why would I possibly go to such lengths when I knew I had no chance of winning against you? Shutters slammed down over the broken windows above and around them, plunging the room into near total darkness. But why lock them all in here? What possible purpose did that serve? None. Unless, all the drain from Naruto's face. You wouldn't. I would. Unlike you, I would do anything to see my dream realized. And I do mean anything. He sucked in an angry breath, only for it to lodge in his throat. What was this? Why couldn't he breathe? You don't recognize it, do you? Silco stepped back, keeping well out of arm's reach. But how could you? You're a stranger to Zon. Naruto grit his teeth. You have no idea where we came from. Silco's voice rang overhead as he struggled for air. The mines they had us in. Air so thick it clogged your throat, stuck in your eyes. He lurched forward, but his lungs screamed, sapping his strength, and Silco evaded him once more. I pulled my people up from the depths, offered them a taste of topside and fresh air. I gave them purpose. Do you even have one? The air blurred around him, distorting his vision. You don't, do you? Of course not. Too much time in the sun. I came from a world where there was never enough to go around. That is why I fight. And you will remember. Enough. Kurama's chakra surged up out of him. His eyes flashed gold and his hands slammed together, blasting Silco away with a wall of wind. He took a deep breath, threw his head back, and then, powder permission to kill. Her herd whipped around with a start as she clobbered a goon. But you said not to. This is an exception. Sparks crackled through the air. Stop holding back. She hollered an affirmative as he stalked after Silco. It wasn't hard to follow him. He trailed him with ease, wanted but to follow the stains. He'd hit him pretty hard back there. There he was. Hadn't even taken him a minute. That was a clever trick with the poison, but you're done. Give up already. The mad mogul grinned at him, leaning against a wall, holding something in his hand. Never. Naruto heard something click. Under the walkway. Horrified, he raced back the way he'd come. And the world went white. Powder. Deckard went flying. Powder didn't give him the chance to recover. The second he was airborne, she caught him by the leg and whipped him into the first solid surface she could find. His back struck a wall and she left him there, dazed as the rest closed in on her like a pack of vultures on a helpless kitten. Well, too bad this kitty had claws. Jab, hook, uppercut, right, left, right again. She picked her moments, waiting for each thug to overextend themselves. She wasn't as small as she used to be, but she was nimble and agile and quick as can be. No one could lay a hand on her. She worked her way through Silco's groupies like a meat grinder, kicking and whirling with reckless abandon. Bones broke, flesh flayed, sinew shattered. Chakra sang a song of savagery through her and she danced to it gleefully, grinning as she finally felt free for the first time in forever. Powder. She flinched despite herself and the metaphorical music died in her head. It cost her dearly. A fist found her face, snapped her head to the side and knocked her down. She whirled with a groan, only to find her worst opponent standing before her. Not Milo or Clagger, they were hanging back. She could have taken them, but not her. Why did it have to be her? Vi, wait, she scrambled back, hands raised. I don't want to fight you, you're on the wrong side. Wrong side. She barely fended off the barrage of blows that followed. It only seemed to make Vi angrier. They killed our parents. Powder, do you even remember? Do you care? How could she ever forget that day? Of course I do, Vi. That wasn't what I meant. Of course you didn't. A stern shove sent her sprawling. But you don't really mean anything, do you? You're too busy fawning over him, focusing on him, falling for him, and with each step you take toward him, you leave us further and further behind. Well, no more. That's not what this is about. Yes, it is. Her sister, her entire world, practically exploded. Ever since you met that blonde bastard, you've been acting all high and mighty, like you're above us now, because you have something. Because you're somebody, because you have power, and what do the rest of us have? Nothing. She threw a wild punch, missing by a mile as she hopped back. We weren't chosen, we weren't given your gifts when I asked. You refused. I've done things you can't possibly imagine, and I'll do worse if it means no one else has to live like this. If you won't fight, then we will. We? Who the hell is we? Naruto and I are fighting back. It's not good enough, V. I wasn't having it. I grew up knowing that I'm less than them, that my place is down here, and if I want more, I'm gonna have to fight for it. And I won't stop at half measures, unlike you. Anger sparked deep within her. Do you even hear yourself? Who are you willing to lose for this? Milo Clagger me. You sound like the old man. Maybe I should. She bit her lip. The way you're acting. It was the wrong thing to say and she realized it much too late. You say that because you have a patron. Vi slammed a fist down on the railing, shattering it. The purpose power. She stabbed a hand into her belt and withdrew a clear vial from within. An awful violet light shimmered in its depths. And now so do I. Vi, no, that's poison. You saw what it did to Deckard. You can't. Did Naruto tell you that? Her lip curled in an ugly sneer. I'm not like you, Power. I'm tired of the world walking all over me. This is real power, just like yours, and it's all mine. Quick as a flash, Vi popped the cap, knocked it back and drained its contents in a single gulp. No, Powder flung out a hand and grabbed at her, only for a meaty fist to backhand her. She was too late. Vi hunched over with a gasp of pure pain. Veins of viscous violet burst across her body as her heart began to hammer, beating in time to her rapid little gasps. In an instant her body gained size and mass that it simply hadn't possessed before. She became taller, faster, stronger. It didn't help that she was already older than her, more experienced in a fight. She always had been taller, but now she loomed over her, like her body had gained years in an instant. She shuffled forward at an awkward lurch, burning yes fixed upon her, arms raised to box. Make your choice. Powder stared at her and her courage quailed deep within her. The effect wouldn't last, she knew. That much shimmer would burn through you fast. If she got through the next few minutes she should be fine. If, big if, very big if. This was Vi. She couldn't fight her own sister, she just couldn't. Choose, Powder. What will your answer be? Vi's eyes burned tainted shade of purple, her voice warped and distorted as she shuffled ever closer. Make your move. But one way or another, you're coming with me. No, wasn't asking. Vi blurred in at her and swung wildly, an attack she barely evaded. You're not strong like me, Powder. Naruto's voice rang in her head, clear as clarion bell. You're stronger than you know. She took a deep breath and drew upon her chakra. The very building itself shook under their feet. Vi rounded on her. What did you do? She never had a chance to answer. Powder. Someone grabbed her, and the world inverted around her with a fiery roar of napalm. All of Piltover saw it. That blistering column of fire. It was the blast heard round the world. The world reasserted itself. Naruto awoke with a start, alarmed to find himself pinned beneath a mountain or rubble. His skull ached abominably and he couldn't see straight. His first thought was to rise, only for a jagged pain in his back to force him back down. Gritting his teeth he struggled against it and somehow succeeded in gaining enough leverage to at least turn his head about. Everything was burning, half the complex was on fire. Where was? Powder lay sprawled out not a yard away, her left arm blackened and burned, pinned under fallen debris. Sparks sizzled overhead as she whimpered softly, unconscious, alive, but clearly in terrible pain. Panic bleated in his, quickening his pulse to a feverish degree. And then he heard something else. Silco's voice in the smog. Kill him. His focus sharpened. Kill him, not Powder. But if he died here, they would take her. And then what would happen? He'd already turned Vi and her brothers. If he got his hands on her. His mind had a terrible premonition, then, of a girl with a shattered mind who called herself Jinx. Please don't let me become her. Something stirred inside him. Get up, he hissed at his unresponsive body. Rise. Damn you, if you don't get up right now, nothing will change. Get up. His arms braced against the ground. Muscles bulged, pushed, and the rubble gave way. He was unarmed, his hands empty, his back riddled with burns he'd taken protecting Powder, one arm hanging loosely at his side. So much, yet still he stalked forward. By this age, how was he still moving? Bravado or sheer willpower? Had to be. He'd collapse any second now. But he didn't. By some miracle he still had the strength to move. There was no panic now, only icy certainty, complete and utter calm. Any and all emotion ceased to be, replaced by a singular determination. No one could come through that door. He mustn't let anyone pass. You cannot pass. You must not pass. Thou shall not pass. Someone rushed through the doorway at him. His body reacted violently. A hand slashed out, fingers hooked into a claw. With a yelp his first victim pitched backward, struggling to hold their bleeding face together. He walked through the doorway, wisps of smoke clinging to his body, and stomped on his skull. And brain matter spattered his face. He kept walking. Forward. Had to move forward. Nothing else mattered beyond the narrow walkway, this bridge that he must hold above all else. His thoughts were fizzling, not entirely complete. He felt calm. Almost eerily so. Less of a concussion. Wasn't that bad, wasn't it? Don't worry about that, I'll handle it. Just like that, Kurama was there, soothing him, mending his arm, flooding his body with golden chakra. We've got hostiles. Incoming on your left. Thanks. Deckard lumbered headlong out of the smoke and threw a wild haymaker at him. Even through his blurry vision it was plain as day. Slow, sloppy, sad. In the time it took him to finish that first swing, he'd already figured out how to kill him. He swayed under it, drove his fist into the boy's collarbone to prevent another jab, and used that momentum to wrap up his arm with his own, bringing the brute close. The empowered lad tried to throw a clumsy punch with his offhand, but it glanced harmlessly off his cheek as he twisted aside. Do what must be done. Do not hesitate. Show no mercy. A look of panic flashed across the mutated boy's face. Close your heart to it, Naruto. Kill him. He reeled his free hand back and, time to say goodbye. His first punch blew clean through Deckard's torso. The second blasted the boy's arm clean off. The third obliterated his head entirely. 3 punches in as many seconds. He let him go, uncaring as the boy's crumbling corpse tumbled to the ground. Rest in pieces. He wouldn't be missed. He limped forward across the catwalk. Next, if this was what mercy got him, Mercy could go hang. Perspective was key here, he knew, but he just didn't care. He should. He really should. This wasn't him. He didn't usually feel this cold. But they brought this upon themselves, allied with a madman, someone he wanted to trust, wanted to believe in, but where had that belief led him here? To this moment. Powder trapped in the rubble, him injured, with no way out. There could be only one recourse, one recompense for this temerity. Stop holding back. Show them who you are. So he did. Nothing simpler than that. Milo reached him next, his wiry body sped on by Shimmer. Sly, slick, speed, but he had seen faster. He swept his legs, grabbed him by the ankle and slammed him face first into the scaffolding. The snarky little shit tried to get up, a testament to the efficacy of the drug coursing through his veins. What? He rasped, spitting violet. What are you? Naruto didn't finish him off, not for the twit's sake, but powder. A simple backhand broke the boy's nose and knocked him clean out. Milo, Clagger barreled over his brother's fallen form and slammed into him like a charging bull, driving him back pace, so empowered was he by Shimmer. Naruto caught him and dug his feet in, slowing his charge. Stopping it entirely? No. He heard the beefy boy gasp. Immaterial. This fight had been decided the moment he freed himself from the rubble. Strong, sturdy, superior but not enough. He grunted once in acknowledgement of the boy's newfound strength, raised both hands above his head and brought his palms down on either of the boy's ears with a resounding clap. Clagger's inner eardrums burst like a moon and he recoiled with a yowl of pain, leaving himself wide opened. He grabbed the foolish boy by the face and bashed his skull against the railing. Down he went. He'd live and heal in time. And then there was Vi. She was stronger and faster than her brothers. Maybe smarter, too. A feint left, then right, and she was upon him, hammering in blow after blow like a boxer. He let her hit him, took one punch to the face, then another, 3, 4, 5, allowed her to exhaust herself and get close. The moment she faltered, he grabbed her right arm and twisted in a single decisive moment. She cried out in pain, dropping to a knee. Don't you see how pointless this is? He stared down at her, wondering why she struggled so. Stop being so damn stubborn and make up with powder already. We can still fix this. She flung burning ash in his eyes, annoying him. Stop that. Shimmer might make you strong, but it had nothing on chakra. Vi's bones broke like brittle beer bottles as her arm went limp in his grasp. She screamed and threw another punch with her remaining arm. Her caught that fist in an open palm and squeezed, shattering her knuckles, breaking every bone in her hand and rendering her hand useless. She'd never throw another punch again. Why you? She yowled at him. Why is it always you? If only you didn't exist. If only I didn't exist. He blinked at her, still numb to it all. You're the one who started this. Now you cry because it's not fair. Grow up. She kept struggling, kept trying to tear herself away. Really shouldn't do that. She might. Too little, too late. In her maddened frenzy, Vi tore her own arm off to get free, ripping it away at the shoulder. Shimmer made your body strong, but fragile. She should have realized it. Her scream of pain would haunt his dreams, her terrified expression more so as she stumbled back, clean off to get free, leaving him holding her limb. I hate you. He couldn't let it end like this. Your powder's sister, Vi. She loves you. She's not my sister. She spat Shimmer at him. Not after this, not after today. Yes, she is. He favored her with a small, sad sigh. You're just too angry to see it right now. When he gave chase, she stumbled back, clutching at her Y-stump. Naruto wondered if he should pursue her. He could capture her, could take her and try to fix this. But what good would that do? You couldn't force someone to be who they weren't. This was a matter between her and Powder. He'd tried interfering before. That only made things worse. Powder was already fractured. Vi was breaking those fractures into fissues. If this kept up, she might well shatter. Maybe it was better this way. Go. He threw Vi's arm down at her feet. Get it reattached if you can. I never want to see you again. She snatched it, paused long enough to sling her siblings over her shoulders, and scarpered. Naruto let her go, watching warily as she vanished into the smoke. I hope you know what you're doing. So do I. A knife slammed into his back and shattered against Sajinhan's skin. Even then he didn't feel angry. Not at all. Just disappointed. He whirled and grabbed the perpetrator with both hands. Silco grunted in surprise, choking as twin palms closed around his throat. It was easy to choke him out. Downright effortless. Even now he could break his neck like a twig and no one would be able to stop him. You don't learn, do you? The sound of his own calm voice would have been concerning once if he wasn't so concussed. If poison couldn't kill me, if your bombs couldn't kill me, what made you think a knife would? Flames flared behind him as the fire built. An explosion was imminent. Powder wouldn't survive. He had a choice. Kill Silco or save Powder. Kill or save. Save or kill. No choice at all. Silco smirked. Actually smirked at him, the rat bastard. He'd won. I knew who didn't have it in you. Poor choice of words. You think I'm sparing you? Naruto snarled and shifted his grip on him, digging a thumb into the Mad Mogul's infected eye. I'm not. Dying is easy. Painless. He pushed down, drawing an agonized cry from his soon-to-be victim. You don't get to go easy. No, you're going to suffer for everything you've done here today, all of it, every bit of it. You'll live long enough to waste away until you're a shell of your former self, and then, only then, will I take your life. But first he tightened his grip, bubbling up under his fingernail. I'm taking this eye. Without a wordless snarl, he slammed his thumb into the mastermind's eye and popped it like a G. Silco yowled in pain, the cry of a powerless man, and slumped in his grasp. His mark was made. And giving you a tan. Naruto whirled and flung the maimed mastermind into the inferno. The screams that followed would forever haunt his dreams. A small price to pay for karmic retribution. He spared Silco's flailing form a passing glance, bent low to grab Powder, and leaped for one of the broken window shutters. Heat slammed into his back, propelling him through and outside the building at breakneck speed. Naruto curled around Powder protectively and grit his teeth as best he could. The ground rushed up to meet him like an old friend. Naruto closed his eyes and braced himself. Darkness swept in,